I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It tells you that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I often say that, we'll sometimes curse or drink to reinforce that concept, and normally we don't do too much of either. However, I do have a ginger ale with some Canadian whiskey I'm sipping tonight because it's been that kind of week already, and it's only Wednesday. I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I'm one of your hosts. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things as Justice League of America, Batman Incorporated, Grifter, and my main love right now, which is Red Skirts, which actually just started posting regular updates again, and we're well into Chapter 2, and I'm going to be very excited to be sharing new, amazing, interesting news about Red Skirts here moving forward because we are officially back in action. That's what I'm going to go with, back in action. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks either hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have done as a creative professional. Can you hear me, Eric? I think your mic is off.
There, Dave.
There you go.
We're experiencing technical difficulties, so you actually hung up on my end for a little bit. So,
okay.
Could you do that reintroduction for me?
All right, I'll do it again. Okay, so we're having all kinds of technical problems tonight. Everybody, please bear with us. Again, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Dave Beatty. I've been a professional illustrator, graphic designer for many years. Worked on the fun things that some people have heard of. Things like Batman Incorporated, Grifter. But my current labor of love is Red Skirts. We are back doing regular updates on Red Skirts right now. So you can check that out. And hopefully I'll be sharing more interesting news about Red Skirts as we continue to move forward here on the show. So Red Skirts is going again. We're very excited about that. But enough about that. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks either hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have done as a creative professional.
Yes, everyone. Yes, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's not Bass God. That's Bass God 14, like a bass guitar. And yes, I am the associate producer of a feature film called Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo. And taking the lead from my co-host from a couple weeks back, unfortunately, I didn't participate with him, but today I am masked up, everybody. I am ready to go. I am masked up. I was inspired by Dave, my co-host. And you know what? The CDC said that it's time for us to wear masks. I'm supporting that. And I want to show everybody how much I support masks, how much I believe in it. I've got here Corona Extra. That's right, Corona Extra. But I've got my mask on, so I'm protected. Look at this. Look at this. Live on the air, everybody. That's how much I believe in masks, everybody. And I'm trying to have a little bit of fun with it, but I actually do believe in masks. And that's why I did that. So, and we do have a special guest tonight, Dave. Can you introduce everybody to him?
Yes, this is Martheus Anton Wade. Say hi. You're live.
Hey, I finally got in. Hey, and I got a video now. So, I think I unbroke the internet with my face this time.
Awesome. Very cool. So Anton's going to join us here at the beginning just for a little bit. We're going to talk just a little bit about some of his art and his career just briefly and tell people where they can learn obviously more about Anton and Wade's World and all the fun things he's got going on. So Anton and I have known each other for, it seems like a very long time.
Years. Yeah, gazillion years, man. Hey, it was before both of us were gray, man.
That's true.
It was before both of us had gray hair. That was a while ago.
A little while ago.
I actually had hair then too. So yeah. Just a little bit.
Very cool. So I want to we've got a comment already.
Hey, cool. Thank you. It's a fun video.
So Jane Shink says that I enjoyed your video, Anton. And for those of you who followed along, I think most people know that Jane is actually my mom. So nice that my mom's here. So Anton, since I think for as long as I've known you, you've been working on Jeddah, but I know that you have a new project you're working on now that you've been primarily promoting. Would you want to tell people more about Shinobi, Ninja Princess, or do you want to tell them about Jeddah? I'm assuming the latter.
It's probably Shinobi Ninja Princess. That's where I've been concentrating most of my stuff for lately. Jeddah, it's a part of the same kind of universe, but it's just a funner part of the universe that I like. You know what I'm saying? So, and ironically, it's a part of the story that I wanted to tell in the first place. But just talking to the industry, some guys in the industry earlier on, they were just like, that wouldn't sell. So that's what I ended up changing it to. I changed it to Jeddah to see if it sell, and it did. But eventually, I came back around and did the other thing.
Okay. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I know that you've been working on the Toshigawa Universe now for many, many years. But one of the other things I want to talk about just briefly is you've worked on a lot of other fun projects too. So one of the things I wanted to mention, because I thought my co-host would find it particularly interesting, is you did the tie-in sort of comic that went along with the film Role Models, correct?
Yeah. That was real fun, man. That's when I was doing stuff with IDW. The cool thing about that is that I turned that whole comic around in a week. So it was pretty crazy, pretty grueling, man. But I got a chance to interact, through email with the actors and stuff like that too, and the director. I can't remember. He was like one of the writers. He wasn't the director. He was like one of the writers or something like that. And being able to work with them and get the likenesses down and stuff like that. Ironically, it was supposed to be drawn. They wanted me to draw it in a specific way. They wanted me to draw it like a kid, if I was a kid. So I drew everything at first with my left hand. And it did, because I'm right-handed. So, and it didn't, they said, well, okay, cool. That looks cool. What would this look like if you had to draw the characters, for real, like straight out? So I drew a version of the character straight out, and then they were just like, no, let's just go with that. So it was real fun. It was fun, man. The actual project came from it was supposed to, if you watch the movie, there's a kid in there and he's like real, like mannish. He's like adult headed, you know what I'm saying? He's always looking at women's breasts and stuff, but it's from his point of view. So that's why they wanted me to draw it as a kid. But then they said they saw how I drew the actors and stuff, and then they were just like, no, let's just go with that one, which is really cool. So
did you have a lot of likeness issues in that? Or did they have the licensing for all the likenesses? Or was that an issue?
It wasn't an issue. Really, the only two likenesses that I ended up having to do were, the little kid, I forgot what his name is, and the guy who I keep calling him Stifler. I want to call him Stifler, but that's an old joke right there, boy.
Yeah.
But him and the little kid were the only two likenesses that I had to do. Everybody else was made up. Because everybody else was like it was like a woman and a child, a dude walking down the street. This person is driving a VW Bug. You know what I'm saying? It was pretty much they were made up. That might be the answer to why the other actors were not in the book, were not in the tie-in book, because maybe they didn't have the licensing issues didn't have licensing issues with those two actors, but everybody else they did, because Paul Rudd was in there too, and that would have been awesome nowadays to be able to say, hey man, I drew Paul Rudd in Role Models. That would have been awesome.
Right.
We had Dave and I worked on a comic book tie-in as well. I was the associate producer for a feature film called Occupants. And Dave actually did the official movie tie-in, and we had like the opposite, where we had way too many likenesses. In that
really?
Yeah, because that was one of the rewards you could get as a backer. was we would put you in the book, and it became a very popular reward. So we had to put likenesses like crazy in it. And then we do have a comment here that Joss is back, and he said the ceiling fans are giving you guys some serious halos.
Hey, worldly.
So you guys are angels from above, right?
That's just the glare off my bald head.
So I did want to mention that because I thought that was really interesting, that project that you worked on. I thought that was really cool. But another thing that's really amazing you got to do is I know you actually were able to take your creator-owned character and actually have Jeddah actually cross over with Billy Tucci's character, She. And that's something really awesome that you've done as well. So
that was like a dream project right there. Just because Billy Tucci was responsible for there even really being a Jeddah in the first place, to tell you the truth. I mean, he broke down like self-publishing while he was getting acupuncture at like a Dragon Con one time. And he was at his booth. He was just getting acupuncture, and I walked up with my portfolio, and I was just like, I'm a She fan, and I had some She illustrations in there. And in the way back, I had some Jeddah stuff, like some really early Jeddah stuff, you know. And it was like maybe like one drawing, tell you the truth. And because really, the reason why I put it back there is because I didn't think anybody was going to go that far in the portfolio. So, you know, because they go usually halfway, maybe even halfway. And then they'll be like, all right, that's cool. Let me tell you what this, and that, blah, blah, blah. So I put her in the back. But he went like all the way through the portfolio, and he got back to the back of the portfolio. And he was like, oh, that's a cool character. Well, who was that? And I was like, man, it's a creator-owned character. You know, this is my son. His name is Anakin. He's all in the shot.
Hello.
Stuff you need to get out the way. This ain't about you. This ain't about you.
Hey, I have kids too. I get it. I have kids too, and I get it. I totally get it.
But no, so you know, he was like, oh man, you need to. Is this your character? And I was like, yeah. I was really trying to get work. You know what I mean? Like that's when I first got in, I was like, man, you know, self-publishing is crazy. You know, I don't want to try that. I just want to get in. I want to get work. So I was there to get work, you know. So I was trying to get him to go back to the front of the portfolio. I was like, hey man, that's I don't want to do nothing with that. Let's look at the She stuff so you can hire me to draw some stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he was like, no, let's talk about this. So he broke down like how he started, you know, self-publishing and, you know, the money aspect of it versus like, you know, the risk reward. It was a long, like it turned into a long, like weird type of information dump, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I look back at it and I was just like, dude, that was pretty cool. Cause you don't get that nowadays. You wouldn't, like, if you walked up to like somebody, you know, like that and be like, hey man, can you break down your business strategy? They'd be like, man, shut up, man, get out of here. You got something for me to sign? You know, you know, but you know, but he broke down business strategy. And then fast forward, you know, a couple years after that, well, not a couple years, a long time after that, I had been publishing for a while. There was this independent crossover called War of the Independents, and I was a part of it. Jeddah was a part of it, and there was supposed to be these tie-in crossovers, and Billy Tucci was a part of it as well. And I was like, man, it'd be really cool if I could get Billy Tucci and, you know, to agree for me to do a Jeddah and a She crossover for this event. So I talked to my boy Dave Ryan, and he was over it. So he put me on the phone with Billy Tucci, you know, and we talked and we came up on a deal and stuff like that. He was just like, well, he was like, all right, well, pitch me the story first, because the story was real important, you know, was going to be real important. So I was a long time She fan anyway. So I was like, all right, cool. So I mixed together the Jeddah lore and the She lore and the Toshigawa and the Sohei monks and put them together. and their history together, and pitched that to him. And he was like, "Dang, man, you really kind of did some research." I was like, "It's not research. I've just been reading this book for a long time." You know what I mean? So, so he was like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." So the cool thing about it is that I got a chance to write it and draw it. So at first I was thinking, he did the cover. What I was thinking was going to happen is that we're going to share the writer credit. So I would write some of it, and then he would come back and then write some, and then I'll come back and write something like that, back and forth. I was thinking about that, but he was like, "Nah, man, you just go ahead and write it. You got a good feel for it." So I wrote it. I sent him a draft of it. He had a couple of tweaks. He tweaked a little bit of it, and that was it. You know what I mean? And most of it was like tweaking on, like she has this, her padding looks like this. It wasn't really anything like story wise, like, that can't happen. You know what I mean? Because this over here, and some dialogue I was kind of worried about because it was like she deep cuts, like there were like background characters that I actually hinted at in conversation between the two characters, you know what I mean? Trying to make a correlation. And he was cool with it, which was I didn't know how to take it. I was like, "Oh, cool, that's pretty awesome," And still today, we if I see him at a con, I'm like, "Hey, what's up, man?" He's like, "What's up?" Man, we talk and stuff like that, and every once in a while I hit him up online or something like that. So yeah, man, that was probably, I think, one of the highest points in doing comics, I think, was just that. You know what I mean? Just because, and it wasn't like the money aspect. It was just because the collaborative aspect and being able to see something that you do come full circle.
Yeah.
And like,
We have a comment there from the chat, and Josh says, "Giving you creative free range is awesome."
Yeah, man. Thanks, man. Yeah, it was really I wasn't used to that, you know what I mean? Because like I said, I come from a place where, well, this too, Dave, in being in graphic design, is that it's always a collaborative effort. I mean, it's one of those things where you put an idea out there and you might think it's the best thing, but an editor will come along, or a boss or something will come along, or your art director that's over you will come along, creative director, whatever, and they'll say, "Oh, no, that won't work because it needs to be green." And then they'll throw your whole idea out. It's like, "Dang, man, this whole thing is red, man. Did you say it's gonna be green? It's not gonna be okay. Let me rethink it." You know what I mean? So, just being able to get that, creative freedom. And I think the real big thing is just having him trust me to be able to do the right things by the character. You know what I mean? That was really cool too. So yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wouldn't mind, give us the elevator pitch for Shinobi Ninja Princess for people that are hopefully watching at home. What's the elevator pitch for it?
The elevator pitch is that it is Young Justice meets Naruto, essentially. It's about a 14-year-old girl. Her name is Shiandria Toshigawa. She is the heir to lead the Toshigawa Ninja Clan. And she is on the run from another ninja clan named the Azumi Ninja Clan, who are trying to capture her and turn her over to her father, who rules Japan. So, and they do this by like incorporating onis, other monsters, and things like that. So it's a futuristic tale with feudal Japan trappings. It has a lot of traditional ninja stuff in it, but it's in a futuristic setting. The last story, the latest story that I did was kind of like a Christmas story, and it was all set around the illuminations during modern day Christmas in Japan. Christmas in Japan is like this huge date night thing over there. So it was kind of about that, and it's just about Shiandria and his other character named Hamasuke getting to know each other. So but it's all modern. It's all in the modern day. It's not like in feudal Japan.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
That sounds very cool. Joss also says world building.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
A lot of world building there.
It's a whole lot of world building, man. It's more so, I would say the world building more so in this one because in Shinobi Ninja Princess, because there's a lot more to explore than it was in Jeddah. Even though, okay, so for you guys that don't know, because most of you guys probably don't know, is that Shianji Toshigawa and Jeddah are the same people. It's just that Jeddah's grown, Shianji's 14. So there is a generational little thing going on here, and we get to actually see how one character progress into who she ends up being at the end, kind of. And when I started, if anybody ever went back and read the Jeddah comics, it was more Batgirl-esque, because that was the times. You know what I'm saying? It was more that. Less so. It was a lot of action, a lot of martial arts, a lot of that, but less so world building. Like, it was like you had these characters, they did these things, and they dealt with these bad guys, and that was pretty much it. You know what I mean? She had one mission, and you followed her on that mission for like 4 books. You know, this is different. This is about her life and the life of the people around her and how they intertwine with each other. As well as the bad guys. So you get to see like the bad guys. The reason why they don't like the good guys, the good ninja Toshigawa clan, is because, you know, Toshigawa clan is rich. They're poor. You know what I mean? They have to take mob contracts to be able to, you know, do things, while the Toshigawa can live pretty much in secrecy because they don't have to worry about making money so much. You know, they got riches. So then you get a chance to be able to see, you know, Onis and how the Onis interact with the people, and, you know, the different regions of Japan that are that the characters inhabit, and stuff like that. It's you know, it's a lot more fun. Like, it's just that's how I just describe it. For me, it's a lot more fun to create.
Very cool. Very cool. So I just wanted to bring Anton on the show tonight, and I wanted to turn everybody on to his work and what he's doing. He's been doing some really great stuff for a really long time. I want to encourage everyone. Definitely, we've got the link up there to the website. Check out what he's got going on. Anton's been selling some original art, some really nice pieces actually recently. They're totally worth picking up. They're really great. He's got a lot of cool stuff happening. I just wanted to turn people on to what Anton's doing, and just encourage everyone, go check out, see what he's got going on, support him as an independent creator. So I just want to encourage everybody to go do that. So
I appreciate it. I hope you do. And I'm always around. I'm always on Facebook. I'm always on, you know, I'm not on Twitter. Twitter's too volatile, man. People just are angry on Twitter, man. I went on there and I got angry for like 5 minutes. I was like, man, I can't be on here, man. It's just angry. But I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. You know what I mean? And now I'm on YouTube too. I'm doing a YouTube show with my son, so called Wade's World. So that's been real fun too. So just give me a yell, and I'm always up to talk comics.
Hey, Anton, before you go, I just wanted to say, I don't know if Dave has told you, but we've been experimenting with the new segment called the Rogues Writers Room. And listening to you talk, I feel like you'd be perfect for a future segment. I think, Dave, you're going to be totally into that. A future segment of the Rogues Writers Room. Basically, we take shows we don't really like or we have an issue with, and we try to fix them. So I think in a future episode, that'd be a lot of fun for us to try to play with.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Hit me up. I'm all about, like, especially in these times of Corona. The thing that we cannot say, we're not supposed to say on the internet for some reason. I don't know, but
you mean this? We're not supposed to say this?
No. But yeah, man, just because you know, I'm always you know, trying to interact, especially with more artists and stuff like that, trying to interact and talk and you know, it could be a lonely world, especially nowadays, you know, man, just sitting here drawing sometimes. So I just like to be able to socialize as much as I possibly can on the web. So yeah, I'll be up
Anton, speaking of that, one of our friends, PJ from Orville Nation, he just came on to say hi to us. He's a friend of us.
Hey.
He has a much larger platform than we do. So I'm going to try to kind of introduce you to here now online, PJ. If you want to maybe have a guest sometime, because PJ has guests on his show all the time, but great channel, Orville Nation. And he's a big leader in the community as far as getting people exposure, exposing other channels, exposing other creators. But PJ, we love you and wanted to say hi and check out Antoine's stuff. I have the link to his site in the chat. So
give me a yell. Like I said, I'm always down to talk. And I need exposure. The good exposure, not the bad ones that you see all on Instagram. I don't need.
You don't want the infamy, Anton. You don't want the infamy.
No, I don't want that. Stay away from it. I don't want that. I don't need that either. That'll bring down my creative stock a lot with that type of that type of stuff.
And PJ said he'll sub, so he's going to check out your stuff. By the way, PJ's excellent, man. Okay, cool. I can only say good things about. I've been on his channel. Dave, you've been on his channel, so he's like our biggest supporter. You know what I mean, as far as the YouTube community and stuff like that. So
awesome. Well, yeah, man. I'm like I said, I'm just getting started on mine on Wade's World. You know, I got like 3 videos up. You know, and they were they were doing a when I was actually doing them, they were filmed on multiple different cameras. So what you end up seeing is that when you see it, it's like different quality. From it, the quality will drop, then it suddenly go up, and then it'll drop, and then it'll suddenly go up. So we're trying to get that worked out. But
I've been keeping all of my various phones when I upgrade, because one of these days what I'm going to do is I'm going to use them to like do a multicam kind of thing. But I've been thinking my solution's going to be is I'll like have one like set on like a highly polarized, like a sepia tone or something, so it looks like an artistic choice instead of it's like, well, we're going to cover this camera's not very good. Right. We're going to make it look like I meant for it to look like this.
Right. Yeah. I might try. Shoot, I should have tried that. Now I can't do it because I gave it away online. That's what my idea was. But yeah, man, I don't know. I'm just trying to have as much fun as I possibly can, man. You know what I'm saying? You know.
Well, and that's like with
we
the
owe
retro.
Now.
Yeah, well, that's like with retro rogues and red skirts and everything I'm doing right now. I've just been trying to enjoy my time, and enjoy being creative. So,
right, that's my big thing, man. That's the reason why I went from doing Jetta to back to doing Shinobi Ninja Princess, man. I was just like, man, I need to have some fun again, man. It's just, it was, being deep in the creative process of comics, man. It could really like drain you. You know what I mean? It drains you like emotionally, sometimes, you know what I'm saying? And I just got to the point where I was like, dude, I gotta have some fun again. I got a little boy. I want to write something that he's going to be able to pick up and read too, and I put him in the book, and I was just like, man, this is fun. Let's just do this.
Right.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
It's working out so far.
Good. So I don't want to keep you on here too much longer. Like I said, just wanted to have you come on the show and wanted to, make people aware of what you're doing and encourage people to support you and check out what you've got going there. I mean, it's we're all about independent creators here on the Retro Rogues. So thank you for being on the show.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
And I definitely want to invite you for a future segment when we do that writer's room again. I would love to try to do that with you. I think that would be a lot of fun. So
cool. Give me a yell. Like I said, if I'm not beating up my son around here, then I'm drawing. Don't call child services on me. I was just kidding.
Very cool. Cool.
But yeah, just give me a thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, Anton. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Bye. So yeah, just real quick, I want to encourage everyone, please check out the link that's in the chat. Check out what Anton's got going on. He's been selling some amazing art pieces for some really good prices. We were talking about collecting original artwork actually recently on the show with Ed Harris. Definitely check out what Anton's got going on. Talented creator, definitely worth your support. So cool. All right, so that's going to be what I have for the pop culture news segment on this episode. I brought a guest. So
well, let's get right into one of our main topics. Let's go into our thoughts about The Witcher, because we're going to talk about The Witcher today, right?
Okay. So, yeah, and I've got a graphic if you want to put it up. So I did put some graphics together for us. So yes, if you don't mind, I'll just set it up real quick. So okay, so we're going to be talking about here the first episode of The Witcher. This is, of course, the series that's available on Netflix. This came out in 2019, although I just saw it. It seems really new to me, and it's 2020. But anyhow, we're just going to talk about our initial impressions and thoughts, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit of spoiler talk about the first episode of The Witcher. And then we're going to ask ourselves if we want to continue down this road and kind of review all of Witcher, or if we're just going to leave it here at the first episode. So tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions of the first episode of The Witcher?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of funny the way that pilots are done these days. They don't necessarily feel like pilots anymore. Like, it's hard for me to imagine that this show was sold on this episode. So it's not a pilot in my... I'm sure it's not a pilot. I know the way, I've heard the way, I should say. I shouldn't say I know. It's not like I have insider knowledge. I've kind of heard the way Netflix works. And in fact, we've talked about this. We reviewed the Dark Crystal series, The Rise of Resistance, before. And they had a very good behind-the-scenes documentary of how that show was made. And one of the interesting things that they talked about in that documentary was that basically they were looking to do sort of like a CGI, or maybe like a CGI blended with puppets, or they kind of had all these kind of crazy ideas of how they were going to do the show. And basically Netflix came up to the Jim Henson Company and said, you know what, let's just make it like the movie, and let's do puppets. Let's do Muppets. Let's do it live action. Let's not, obviously they enhanced it with CGI, but all the characters were practical. And so, I can kind of extrapolate from that. And I feel like, that's probably kind of what happened with The Witcher. Somebody decided that they want to do a Witcher series. I'm not very familiar with the book. In fact, it's kind of ironic. The way that I heard about the Witcher property in the first place was through this. This was a gift that my brother gave me one year, which is the Witcher video game. And I know there's a lot of people. This is actually the Witcher Wild Hunt for the PS4. And I'd never heard of the book or anything like that before. Like, I had very little knowledge of the property or anything like that, or what it was, until I got the game. And I played the game a little bit, but it wasn't that interesting to me. I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't, because I have limited space on my PlayStation 4, I ended up getting rid of it and putting something else on. So with this first episode, I just feel like I'm missing a lot. I feel like I would benefit a lot if I played through that video game, if I played some of the other games, because I think there's several Witcher games. And I feel like I would have benefited a lot if I'd played those games and read the book. And I feel like I'm way behind the curve. What do you think, Dave?
Well, here's the thing for me. My initial impressions of it, I mean, I found it kind of interesting. I could tell from the tone of this that you tell me if I'm wrong, Eric. I've never really seen a lot of Game of Thrones, but I feel like they really want this to be kind of like Game of Thrones, because I was expecting it to be a little bit more action. And there were times when it's like, man, there's a lot of dialogue happening right now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. I thought we were going to see him, killing monsters more, if that makes sense, because they keep talking about that the Witcher, he hunts and kills monsters. They talk about that throughout the show. But I, having played D&D when I was younger, and then having read a lot of the Dragonlance books, I'm sure some people in the audience are probably familiar with those, particularly like the comic books that they adapted from Dragonlance. And then I've talked before about how much I love the Adventurers comics. They used to publish the black and white comics from the 80s, and then the spinoff titles that came out of that, whether it was Warriors or Ninja Elite. So I like this kind of world, and I like what I was seeing. And overall, I thought it was interesting, but I did feel a little lost at times. I think that's my general impression. It's like I like
that's my biggest thing. My biggest thing is I feel like obviously this is like an introduction. Like this is not even to me like the first act. In fact, I know because I've seen some of the teasers. One of the major characters isn't even introduced yet. I think they're going to be introduced in the next episode, and I don't like that. I have to say I miss the old pilot days when you kind of like. Okay, here's a good example. People criticize the first season of Next Gen all the time. They criticize it all the time, and I'm not like a huge defender of the first season of Next Gen. I think it's watchable, and there are several episodes I really like, but for the most part, I do understand its limitations. But Encounter at Farpoint is a great pilot, and I will defend Encounter at Farpoint all the time because all the elements are there, and we know exactly who these characters are almost immediately. They introduce them, we get a sense of who they are, and they never really change that much. You know what I mean? Like even all the way up to All Good Things, the last episode of Next Generation, they never really changed that much. So what I like is the world is put together, and now we can play with it. And now, of course, the writers, the producers who came and went all the way through Next Gen got to do all these neat different ideas and things like that. But because they had all the pieces. I don't feel like I have the pieces in this first episode of The Witcher. And clearly I don't. Like I said, one of the major characters hasn't even been introduced yet. So I'm like, yeah, I don't get what the hell's going on. Now, granted, maybe watching the second episode, I'll be like, oh, okay, it makes more sense now. But I just felt there was too much going on. And here's the thing. You mentioned this. Here's my big criticism. You mentioned this. It's very wordy, yet it doesn't really explain anything. It's kind of like wordiness that I'm just like, I'm not following this conversation at all. Like I'm just kind of zoning out and being like, there were points that I got bored, where I actually started to get bored and I almost fell asleep, Dave. Because I did watch it late. And I haven't been getting good sleep because of everything going on. I just haven't ever since everything started. And I had moments where I was starting to fall asleep. And I'm like, it's so wordy. Can't you explain things to me a little bit better so me as someone who has not read the books knows what the hell is going on? I mean, I understand the basic premise of The Witcher from playing the game as far as the Monster Hunter. Oh, and I do have to say, the opening scene for me, I thought it looked cheesy. I thought the effects were not done well with that. When he kills that monster in the very first scene, it did not look right to me. It looked like, B movie quality, and that kind of, I think, took me out of it a little bit too. But as you mentioned, it's very wordy, and it's like, well, how come you're not explaining things to me better so I can follow this and understand what the hell's going on? I get that there's supposed to be some mystery, especially with the female character, with the young female character, the princess. I get that. I do understand that. But so much is happening and so much is going on without any real explanation. Did you even understand who the enemies were and why they decided to kill everybody? Like, I didn't understand exactly what that was,
Yeah, and like I said, that's my main, sort of criticism I'd have to say is the fact that I was lost a lot of the time. It's like, okay, this kingdom is under siege. These people are taking, but it's so weird because it's like when you watch other things, like let's take Highlander, for example. When the Kurgan and his people attack, you kind of get, you understand what's happening, right? You get, there's a couple of lines of dialogue as they're on horseback as they're leaving, right?
Well, it's very straightforward. It's two rival clans and they're fighting each other.
Exactly.
That's self-explanatory.
But it's like in this, there's a lot of pageantry to it. They're knighting people. Well, we're getting into spoiler conversation now, but they're kind of knighting people and whatever. and then they go off, and you can tell they're going to fight this battle, but you have no context. I'm like, okay, do they want to take over the land? Do they have a beef with them? Like what why are they fighting? You know, like there's no, for me, I couldn't follow what was going on. And then it was weird too, because it was like, okay, this lady who could be this little girl's mother is actually her grandmother. Like, is she that old? Like, what happened?
Yeah, that was very confusing to me. That was very confusing to me.
And that's overall, I'd have to say it's my criticism. Now, they do have a really, really awesome sword fight. They had two, actually. That whole scene where the Witcher character, Geralt, or whatever his name is, and he comes back to the town and he fights the guys. Looks like he's going to fight in the tavern. Like, I really like that sword fight scene. And then when he takes on the lady who may or may not be a witch or something, I don't understand what her deal is either.
The demon is the way I understood it. She may or may not be a demon,
but not. Okay. I don't know. But that was kind of my. But that's some of that sword play was really well done, and that was the thing that kind of kept me hooked there towards the end. I'm like, okay, well, this is at least fun. I'm enjoying this sword play. They've obviously done their research, and this is cool. Especially the one female character who was fighting with it was either a dirk or a dagger, and then the long blade at the same time. Like, a lot of that stuff was fun to watch. I love when people do, double-bladed stuff. So I enjoyed watching all of that. But I honestly, I didn't understand what her deal was. I couldn't tell, is she a sorceress? Is she a witch? Is she something else? I can't follow along. And that was the thing. I was just, most of the time I was like going, okay, you're saying something. Some people are mad, but I don't understand what the point. I felt like I had no context for what I was watching.
Well, this is the limitation, I think, of what the term, serialized storytelling, right? Because that's all the rage now. Everything has to be serialized. We can't have anything be episodic anymore. We can't have self-contained stories because that's passé. You know what I mean? I would argue the first episode of every single damn show should be, episodic. It should be a first, second and third act. It should be a complete story to introduce the characters. And that's the way pilots used to be made, because pilots often didn't get picked up. This is, I think, one of the limitations of the way the business is done now, especially with a studio like Netflix. Netflix doesn't do pilots anymore. They might do some proof of concept stuff. Like, for instance, I'll use the example of Dark Crystal. They showed some of the proof of concept stuff they did, including some of the mix of CGI with the puppet. And Netflix says, we don't like that. Let's just do puppets. You know what I mean? And so you can tell that they did proof of concept stuff, but I don't think they do pilots anymore. You know what I mean? That once they decide they're going to do something, they're going to do it. So instead of having like a complete story where we fleshed out the characters at least a little bit, so we at least know who they are, we don't do that, because this is not even the first act of the story. As I said, we have not even gotten one of the major characters yet. This is not even a first act. So it's like, we talked about Picard, which I loved, you know what I mean? Which I adored. And the entire first 10 episodes, the entire first episode is the first act of a story, and very clearly is the first act of a story. It's not a real story. You know what I mean? It's the beginning of a story, So I don't like that. I really don't. And maybe I'll like it more with the second episode, but right now I just, like I said, I feel kind of lost, and I feel like, it's a little too wordy. Without explaining anything. It's like, if you're going to talk a lot, explain what the hell's going on. You know what I mean? Get me involved in the world. So, you talk about Game of Thrones, because I was a big Game of Thrones fan, especially in the early seasons. And I could think the first episode, I knew exactly what was going on. I knew exactly what the world was. It's very simple. Ned Stark is basically the friend of the king. The king is having some problems. There's a rival, basically the last Targaryen of the previous house. And it's just all set up immediately. They already put in the undertones of the White Walkers. I mean, everything is right there in the first episode, and you already kind of know what's going on. It's this rivalry between these different houses. The king's kind of in the middle. We still have what's left of the previous house. And now we got this supernatural thing coming. And you get it all in the first episode. You get it all in the first episode, and you know exactly what's going on. I don't know what the hell's going on in this show. You know what I mean? That's
well, and yeah, and that's kind of my thing, because when they showed us the castle, for example, I kept thinking it's a shame there's not like a narrator saying, and in the kingdom of blah blah blah, at the castle of so and so, where the young princess's mother and father were murdered. Like, just something.
Even some text at the bottom of the screen, kind of telling us, something. Again, and Joss, he says, so you feel like you had a meal, but you were left still hungry. Not enough substance to feel like you want to see another episode. And I think that's exactly right. That's kind of how I feel. It's like, on the one hand, to use that analogy, you don't want to be stuffed. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I got what I wanted and I don't need any more. But you want to feel like satisfied, like you kind of understand the world enough so that it's interesting to you, Yeah. And right now, I don't feel like I understand the world at all. And again, I did play some of the game. You know what I mean? So I kind of understand the Witcher. Obviously, you play as the Witcher in the game. I don't know any of these other characters. I have no idea who they are. I have no clue. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah. So, and just to say, like, as far as like some of the design work, I thought was really interesting. Like visually, it's a very interesting world to look at. I liked a lot of the armor, and as I said, some of the swordplay I thought was really, really good. I really enjoyed some of the swordplay, and I like Cavill. Just generally speaking, I everything I've seen him in, I've always enjoyed him in everything. He's very charismatic and interesting. But like I said, my initial opinion, my initial review of this first episode of The Witcher is I'm a little lost, and I don't quite understand what's happening. That's my whole take on this first episode of The Witcher. I'm a little confused.
Well, I do want to say this, like you mentioned, you like the sword play, and that's something that maybe will keep you coming. Which, by the way, is the sword play enough to keep you coming? Is this something that you want to continue watching?
I don't know. I'm on the fence.
There you go.
I'm on the tip of the blade. The tip of the blade.
The thing that I like, the thing that intrigued me, is I was a big fan of the old Prince Valiant Family Channel cartoon series, okay? I really like that show. And the way that begins with Prince Valiant is basically his kingdom is attacked and destroyed in the first episode. But you get a real sense of what's going on. Like, the people that are attacking are basically like kind of a marauder, Viking kind of people. That's what they do. They're not good. You know what I mean? And Prince Valiant and his family, they flee with like a handful of their people, and they're in exile. And of course, Prince Valiant then needs to find King Arthur to save his kingdom because they've lost. The first episode, they've lost. You know what I mean? The main character is lost. So now he has to go on a quest to find, King Arthur. Now, we have a similar setup in The Witcher, where basically we have this princess character that's gone through the same thing. But I'm so confused. I don't feel that same kind of investment as to, well, what's going on? It doesn't seem to me like there's even any possibility of restoring the kingdom because they killed everybody.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm like, so what's the motivation? If everybody's dead, like in Prince Valiant, they didn't kill everybody. They conquered them. They got conquered. So they need to take the throne back. That's the whole point of the story. You know what I mean? Is Prince Valiant's going to get King Arthur to help him take back his father's crown, And in this, you don't get a sense of, well, what's the point? They killed everybody. She's the only one left. So, you know what I mean? Granted, Obviously, she seems to have some sort of supernatural power. And obviously that's she's the key to everything, which I kind of get sick of that phrase, but she's like the key to everything. That's pretty obvious. But it's like, I wish they had a kind of like, I like what would have been nice for me is like, they had that Black Knight that was clearly like kind of the captain of the guard or something like that. Like if she was running around with him, you know what I mean? Like that would intrigue me a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like if there were like a couple other people with her, you know what I mean? That would intrigue me more than this sort of just weird situation where she just runs off by herself into the woods and everybody else apparently is dead, So that's kind of where I'm at. I like that basic idea when a kingdom falls and is destroyed like that. I just like it to be a little bit more straightforward, a little bit better explained to me as to what happened. What What did I just see? What just happened exactly? You know?
Right, and that was like me. I felt like I didn't have enough context to understand what I was seeing. So let's go ahead and break it on down here. So I'd say, you know, if I was going to give it a letter score, I would give Witcher. It's got good production value. It's got good acting in it for the most part, even though I'm a little disconnected from some of it because I don't have the context. I like some of the choreography and the swordplay. I'd say I give it a B minus. That's what I would give it, a B minus. So then I have to ask myself, it's like, am I interested to watch a second episode? I'm gonna say I'm gonna put it up to Eric. Eric, if you're intrigued enough that we continue down this road, I'm willing to continue down this road. But if you're kind of like, no, I'm not feeling it, I'm probably okay to move on. How do you feel about it?
Well, I've heard reviews of this before that we're spoiler free, and a lot of people did the same thing I just did, and they said that they really did not like the first episode at all. But a lot of those people came back and said that they ended up really liking the series. So I'm willing to give it episode 2, but I'm giving it a lower review than you. I'm giving it like a D plus, because if we weren't doing reviews, I can say this: if we weren't doing reviews, I would not be watching another episode of this, you know, but because we did a review of it, I feel more inclined to give another chance. Like I said, I know from the trailers, at least one major character hasn't even been introduced yet. So I'm kind of, you know, maybe that will help is kind of what I'm saying, you know, maybe it'll take a little bit different direction. Maybe it'll give us a little bit more explanation, you know, a little bit more exposition. I don't know, but I am willing to give it another episode just to see that other main character, maybe get some more explanation. But I'm giving it a D plus. And by the way, I'm going to say this: I wasn't that impressed by the acting. I thought Henry Cavill was very wooden. The diction is kind of weird, the way he talks, and it almost feels like a Batman voice to me. You know what I mean? And I was just like, you know, he's real husky, and it didn't seem very natural to me at all. And I like the actor. I mean, I'm not a big Man of Steel fan. I hate Batman versus Superman. But I really like Justice League, and I did like him, and I've always liked him. Like, I like him as an actor. I like him as Superman. But I didn't think his acting was very good. And that's just my personal opinion. I felt like he was the voice was too husky and too weird. It didn't sound natural. I get that he's a mutant or whatever, but still, it wasn't working for me. If anything, I'm more intrigued by the princess and would like to know exactly why she is the key to everything. And, you know, what's going on. Why did they decide to kill all these people just to basically capture her? Because they didn't kill her, which is really weird too. You know, they killed everybody else. They captured her, yet they let her go. Well, she escaped. You know what I mean? So I am a little bit more intrigued with her, with that character, actually, than I am with the Witcher at this point. So I'm almost like on the opposite of you. Like I'm kind of liking it for completely different reasons. You know what I mean? Because I just wasn't impressed that much with the rest of it. Oh, and the wizard character, from the kingdom, yeah. I'm kind of intrigued by him a little bit too, because he feels very Merlin to me, and I'm sure he survived, and he will see him again. You know what I mean? So I am a little intrigued by that character because I'm always like the Arthurian legends, and he does seem very Merlin to me. Would you agree? He's very Merlin.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
So, and you got a shout out from James Stone. He was saying hi, Dave.
Hi, James. So, all right. So we'll go ahead and we'll wrap this up. So we'll give Witcher episode 2 a shot. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I'm good with doing that. I'm good giving at least one more episode.
All right. So we'll give The Witcher another shot on next episode. So if that's good, if we don't mind, let's do some house cleaning here just real quick for the show. So first up, I want to mention we are doing, the sketch card comments. So what you do is want you to be a part of the Rogues Gallery and comment. Everyone who comes in and actually comments during the episode, it doesn't matter at what point you comment, you're entered into a drawing to potentially win a original art sketch card. Again, the two major rules are please live in the United States, and then number 2, please be above the age of 18. So For tonight, Eric and I kind of narrowed it down because I've got too many sketch cards to pick from. So we're going to let the Rogues Gallery decide again, but we've narrowed it down because I feel like last week I was like holding up like 30 cards, like, what do you guys want to do? So tonight, we've narrowed it down to 3. So the 3 cards that you can pick from tonight, and we want your feedback. You tell us what you would like to see, and then we'll decide on the card a little bit later on the show, and then we'll announce who the winner is, hopefully by the end of the episode. So the first card we're going to do for tonight, if I can get it into the camera and into the light, we're going to do is the Punisher. So we got the Punisher here. This is on our Retro Rogue official cardstock here. And I don't know why my light is so bad tonight. I keep moving it around, and it's just not helping me. It's fighting me, everyone. So we got the Punisher here. This will be one that you can pick. Then we have RoboCop. This one, and again, these are all drawn live on my Facebook page for those people interested. So we have RoboCop. This is another possibility. And then we have the animated Batman. So these will be the 3 for tonight. So please, those of you in the Rogues Gallery, please comment and tell us which one of these you would most be interested in winning. Either Batman, the RoboCop, Punisher, or Batman, the animated series. And again, all you need to do is comment at any point during the show. Those of you who already commented have already been entered in to win. Anyone else who's coming on board, please just comment during the episode. I do have a quick update, too, for our Retro Rogues digital magazine. We have been working away at that. I actually have 3 stories in-house. I have an interview. I have an art piece that was written by Ed Harris. And I have another surprise one that I don't want to talk too much about. And we actually have a guest contributor, James, who just commented, who said hi. James has actually contributed to the magazine. And I'm very excited for everyone to see what he's contributed. So we're going to have a really, really good first edition, hopefully coming out here pretty soon. With everything that's going on, we've been pushed back probably another couple of weeks, but hopefully it'll be rolling out very soon. So I want to thank everyone who's contributing. I want to tell everyone hang tight with us. It'll be coming out really soon.
And we do have a couple votes already. So
good.
we've got 1 vote from Joss for Punisher. Right. James votes for RoboCop.
Okay.
And Jane votes for RoboCop. So we got 2 RoboCop, 1 Punisher so far.
All right, so I'm going to start a list. So far we have...
So far it's RoboCop with 2, and we got 1 for Punisher.
RoboCop with 2.
No love for Batman yet. But nobody likes Batman the animated series? Come on.
All right, so we'll put that up again, probably in between the segments or whatever, and see if we can get a few more votes. But as it stands right now, it looks like we're probably going to be going with RoboCop unless some people chime in. All right, so let's go ahead and do we want to go ahead and get into pop culture news?
Yes, that sounds good to me.
Okay,
pop culture news.
I've got the graphic up if you choose to use it, and then we'll set it up here real quick. Okay, so now we're going to go into our pop culture news segment. During this particular part of the show, we talk about anything that's interesting in the world of pop culture news that might have actually caught our attention. And so we just bring it up to everyone else. We talk about it here just briefly. My big pop culture news item is I brought a guest on. Anton was my contribution for pop culture news this week. So tell me, Eric, do you have anything for this week's episode in pop culture news?
I have quite a bit, actually. I'm going to start out. I always try to, if I'm going to say something negative, I always try to start out with the negative first so that we can end on a better note. So right now what I've got here, and actually, Dave, you were the one that initially told me about this. This is a Hollywood Reporter article from April 3rd, 2010. It says, ComicHub, briefly hailed as savior for print comics, cancels ambitious plan. I felt it was important that we talk about this because I brought the positive side of this to last week's show where we were talking about ComicHub had this plan to basically sell digital comics over their service, over their app, and then the idea was some sort of credit would be given that could be redeemed later on at a brick and mortar retail shop, and you could get a physical copy of the book. Said the company claimed it could solve the industry shutdown caused by coronavirus. It was an idea that some heralded as the savior of the comic book industry. But just days after it was publicly discussed, ComicHub's proposed combination of print and digital sales seems to be dead in the water. The Hollywood Reporters confirmed that the previously teased announcement of the solution scheduled for Monday will no longer be forthcoming, following retail and comic book spokesman John Hendrick telling Newsarama.com that pushback from other retailers had stalled the initiative. And said, quote, "It's obvious from the concerns voiced by our peers that this isn't an initiative that they can get behind," Hendrick told the website. "But until such time as we can all agree on a solution that fellow retailers can support, there is no point in Stu Colson, the founder and owner of ComicHub, continuing this at this time." Said, indeed, retailer pushback was swift to the ComicHub plan, which would have seen readers receive a digital edition of their print purchase, regardless of when the printed edition was available, in a planned workaround to the current pause of print comic distribution. The pushback was best summarized in a public Facebook post by retailer Brian Hibbs, where he wrote, quote, "I can barely make a profit from my much, much larger discounts than what the Comics Hub plan offers. And this creates an exponential amount more of work and having to track and organize such sales. All for what will be a paltry revenue." And they would not support it. I would love to reach out to a retailer and see what, like a local retailer in the Phoenix area, to see what their take was on it. But yeah, apparently the plan fell apart before it really even started.
Well, I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, I looked at it from the standpoint just as the creator, because I do have certain titles with DC Comics I do occasionally see royalties from. And I knew that from that standpoint, in terms of like counting a sale and whatever, from a business standpoint, from a revenue share standpoint, it kind of causes, some issues for those of us on the creative side, to which, if it'll help the industry, I'm willing to forego a little bit. That's fine. I can see it from obviously the retailer standpoint. It makes sense. But listening to that comment reminds me of the things I used to hear when I was self-publishing and we were on the road with Bushy Tales, and I was trying to get retailers to pick up Bushy Tales. Those same arguments were the same reasons for why they couldn't just order Bushy Tales directly from us and why we had to go through Diamond. That kind of mentality is part of what created the problem of the single distribution system that basically got knocked on its keister by the global pandemic. So at some point, someone's going to have to look beyond, you know what I mean, and be willing to do a little bit more, in order to move the industry forward. That's my own personal opinion.
I want to make this point because this point has been made in the larger context of the economy as a whole. In a lot of ways, the pandemic is being used as cover for what are fundamentally bad business practices. In other words, people are just sort of using the corona effect to justify, oh yeah, it's just because of the pandemic. You know what I mean? So if this hadn't happened, there wouldn't be any problems. The comic industry is a great example of that. The comic industry has been on life support for a long time because, as you said, of the single distribution, the direct market and the single distribution system. I've been hearing this ever since I first started going to San Diego Comic-Con, which was like in 98 or 99. And people were always predicting doom and gloom for the comic book industry because of all the bad business practices. And back then, there's still two distributors. They were small. There was Cold Cut and one other one. There were technically three distributors back then. Which one?
It might have been Capital.
There was another one. No, Capital was before my time. You know what I mean? There was another one, a very small. They only did independent books and things. Cold Cut.
Okay. Yeah.
Cold Cut only did independent books too.
Yeah.
They didn't have DC and Marvel. DC and Marvel, in my opinion, just screwed it all up. You know what I mean? With this going with one distributor. And then, of course, me, I'm a big person that I really lament the loss of the newsprint, and the spinner rack and all that, and the returnables, which I think was a big help. Obviously, there were reasons that happened, but I'm just saying that was, I think, bad for the industry as a whole. So it just as in other parts of the economy, my point is, I think fundamental flaws in the comic industry have been exposed by the pandemic. That's my point. And so the flaws were already there. Now they're bare for everyone to see, and it's really questionable what's going to happen. It's really questionable what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how this bears out. At the end of the day, the people who have always kept the comic industry afloat has always been the fans.
Correct.
Yeah. Been the readers. It's the people who love and appreciate the material. They're the ones who keep it going. So whether Diamond is there or not, I think at the end of the day, the readers, the fans, the people who love comics, they would have been the ones who would have kept it going in whatever form that it would have taken on. Whether it would have been a more, publisher direct to you using Kickstarter and Indiegogo and things such as the distribution channel, whether it would be, selling digital copies.
That's already happening
or whatever. So
that's already happening. That's how we did our book, the book that we collaborated on. We didn't use any distribution method other than the one you did ourselves. So I think that's a great example of probably where the industry is heading. And we did digital and we did physical. That's the other point I want to make. And I see all sorts of independent creators doing that path. Look at Brian Pulido and all of his success, where he's breaking records with his Kickstarters and things like that. I mean, over $100,000 a pop. Yeah. And although he does use Diamond, that's not where he's making his money. That's not what's keeping Coffin Comics going. You know what I mean? It's those Kickstarters.
Yeah.
So I think you just nailed on the head. That's the future of the industry.
Yeah.
It's not about print or digital. It's about getting your product directly to the consumer. And Diamond, I don't know. I think your days are numbered. That's my opinion. Really do.
Yeah. All right. So what else have you got for us this week?
All right. So I got another one that I think is kind of interesting. So here's an industry that's trying to kind of navigate the post-pandemic world, if you will. This is actually a BBC News article. I got this particular one is off of Yahoo News. But this actually comes from BBC News. The headline reads, "Coronavirus. With WrestleMania, the show must go on no matter what." And this article is dated April 8th, 2020. Now, we don't talk about sports a lot. In fact, I don't know if we've ever even talked about sports on this program before. But wrestling, of course, is a middle ground of sports entertainment. In fact, that's the phrase that McMahon uses, is he calls it sports entertainment because, and I'm really sorry, spoiler alert, if you don't know, pro wrestling's fake. Sorry if you didn't know that. But there's also a lot of crossover between comic book fans and wrestling fans because there's a lot of bleed over. Wrestlers are in a lot of ways like, larger than life, real life superheroes because they are real people embracing a character on stage, essentially. So this has been interesting. We haven't talked about this before, but it's something I've been watching. It's kind of interesting. So it says football, basketball, baseball, all canceled because of coronavirus. But when it comes to wrestling, must the show go on? WrestleMania is the Super Bowl of wrestling, attracting thousands of fans a year and watched on television by many more. This year, the event held without an audience for the first time and broadcast over the weekend of the 4th and 5th of April from the World Wrestling Entertainment's training facility in Florida. 53 performers appeared across 18 matches, including one match with 5 wrestlers and 1 referee in the ring at once. And another segment saw around 10 people, including recently signed former NFL star Rob Gronkowski, in a brawl. Broadcast took place days after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis issued a statewide stay-at-home order as the number of confirmed corona cases rose. I'm not going to get the official number. As coronavirus has stepped through the U.S., sports events around the country have been canceled or postponed. WWE faced calls to cancel WrestleMania. Critics pointed to Roman Reigns, one of its most prominent wrestlers, who said he, quote, made a choice to pull out of the main event. Reigns has had leukemia, type of cancer, and returned to wrestling when it went into remission in 2019. But the program went ahead. Many of the performers took to social media ahead of the event to argue that the show must go on despite COVID-19, or I'm sorry, the show must go on not despite COVID-19, but because of it. So you have this is a wrestler here, Seth Rollins, from his Twitter. Says, today is WrestleMania. Says, every year since I was a little boy, I've woken up on the morning of WrestleMania feeling excited. The day had finally arrived. WrestleMania was bigger than Christmas for me. Since 2013, that excitement has been coupled with surreality, as I've been so fortunate to have played a small role in the lore of the event, hopefully inspiring young children to follow their dreams the way my idols did for me, and giving anyone watching moments to look forward to and memories to look back on. Today is WrestleMania, and that feels so strange to say in the midst of the pandemic. It says WrestleMania is not the only fighting sport that plans to go ahead. Mixed martial arts showcase UFC 249 is still slated to go on April 14th. It says in late March, UFC President Dana White came under fire for comments he made about the pandemic. He said UFC 249 would be continuing as planned in April. Quote, the question becomes, how long are we going to do this, he asked. How long are we going to stay in our houses and hide? So it's very interesting. So World Wrestling Entertainment, I still call it the WWF, World Wrestling Federation, because that's what I grew up on. And I am not a big wrestling fan now. I grew up on it. In the 80s, I liked Macho Man and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and of course Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. That's the era when I was really into wrestling. I don't really have, any skin in this fight. I actually support UFC more than I support WrestleMania and pro wrestling at this point, because I have watched some of those fights within, like, say, the last couple years. I have to be into the fighter to be into UFC. So it's kind of interesting what they're doing. And this is also in the midst of a recent proposal by the Major League Baseball, where they're actually looking at doing their season in Phoenix. They're actually looking at doing their entire season in Phoenix, where it would only be the players and the officials and the coaches and no audience. There would be no spectators. The reason they want to do it in Phoenix is because Phoenix is one of the big spring training hubs, so we have a lot of different fields out here. Baseball is a really big thing, in the Phoenix metro area. So it's kind of interesting to see what a lot of these companies are doing and trying to navigate the current crisis. And obviously, some of these decisions can be very controversial, but it's also interesting to see what they're trying to do. And by the way, Josh, I am sorry. Yes, it is fake. You said what? Fake? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to break it to you. But UFC's not, as far as I know, unless it's like, a fixed fight where they throw they throw the fight. But Dave, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, let's see. I saw some people commenting on WrestleMania when it was actually happening, and I thought it was. At first, I thought they were watching a rebroadcast of something, and I didn't realize it was like a current real, like it was going live. Like I didn't realize it was an actual. I thought it was a rebroadcast because people kept calling out Undertaker, and I was like, "Isn't he retired?" So it made me think that it was a rebroadcast of something else. So
you didn't even realize it was live. You didn't realize it was live until right now, until me bringing up the story.
I had no idea. I didn't watch it. I haven't been a wrestling fan for a very long time. I did watch something that had a wrestling connection that actually plays into pop culture, because someone has actually taken footage of Macho Man and cut him in as if he was the Emperor talking to Darth Vader. It's the scene in Empire where Vader kneels down and the projection of the Emperor comes up and says, "Oh yeah," and he's doing the whole Macho Man thing.
Does he ask him to snap into a Slim Jim?
No, he doesn't. But it's like those classic Macho Man burns, like the big trash talking thing, He's like, and I saw what you did there, and it cut me real deep, you know. And they show clips where it's like where, you know, him talking to Luke and saying, you know, we can rule the galaxy as father and son. You can destroy the Emperor. Like, so they kept picking up all these different moments and then having Macho Man. And the whole time Vader's just kind of like, almost kind of like the dog with the tilting of the head, just listening, you know. So it's pretty funny. Well, I thought it was funny. I showed some other people that didn't get it. It was like, whew. But for me, I got it. I thought it was funny. You know, that's, you know, something's going to have to be done. Now, just so everyone knows, for reasons I can't explain, I was classified as an essential worker, and I've been at work pretty much every day.
Yeah.
It's been stressful at times. I've wanted to punch people at times. It's not been fun. Okay. Not all the people that are out working with people are being nice or kind. It's difficult. It's tense. It's not been fun. Okay. But that being said, you know, eventually at some point, we're all just going to have to figure out a way to move forward. I don't know what that is. I don't know when that is. Certain parts of the country.
What did you hear about the Major League Baseball proposal? Did you have any thoughts on that?
I hadn't heard that until you just brought that up. I'd heard someone talking about something similar to that, but I didn't realize that was an actual serious conversation.
Well, that was the plan before. Remember? They were going to start doing that. I think even the NBA was going to start doing that, but then they wanted to shut down because they had numerous positive cases. You know what I mean? And so they actually shut down before everything else officially shut down because they had players that tested positive. Right. I'm not sure if you saw the thing with Mark Cuban, you know, where they actually showed him getting the message while he's watching the game. You know, Mark Cuban owns an NBA basketball. They showed him getting the message and the reaction, and it's like, yep, they were shutting it all down because the NBA decided to do that. But before that time, they were talking about, you know, doing something similar where it would just be the players, the officials, you know, no spectators. In fact, I saw a game where the professional Australian basketball team was doing just that. And then I think they got shut down too. And then I recently saw a thing where they did the sumo championship in Japan, and that went forward again, but with no spectators. And that was fairly recently. So it's kind of interesting to me because on the one hand, I feel as that you got to figure out ways to get around this. That's the one hand that I feel about this is like, you got to figure out ways to keep your business going. You've got to figure out ways to keep people entertained, especially people that are stuck at home. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that I like about the fact that we're doing this show. You know, in my small way, I feel like, hey, we're giving people a diversion. We give something to see, something to do, if you will. But, you know, on a larger scale, these other entities are trying to do the same thing. And are we going to end up causing more harm than good if we shut them down indefinitely with no end in sight and no plan to get them back up and running? You know, because to me, it makes a lot more sense to phase things in than to do it all at once. And the next thing you know, just one day, we've got crowded stadiums again without even really knowing whether this thing has been taken out or not. You know, if you use the analogy of the Spanish flu of 1918, there were like 2 or 3 waves of that. So we don't know exactly where we are with that right now. And we won't until it happens. So it seems to me that you have to find some sort of plan. Joss mentions, he says, I cannot see how that would work, 32 teams in one city. Again, it's because we have so many stadiums. They have a plan. They've already got the plan. Whether they're going to do it or not is the question. But it's feasible in Phoenix because we just have so many. We have so many baseball stadiums here because of spring training. So it is feasible to do it. It's possible. They could do it here in Arizona. Bobby just joined us. And Bobby Chambers, glad to see you. And he says, hello, gents. The baseball idea is crazy. It says the Rangers played 2 blocks from me. And that's right. You live in the West Valley, right? And there's a lot of stadiums in the West Valley of Phoenix on the west side. I live on the east side. But everywhere in Phoenix, there are professional baseball stadiums for spring training. They're all over the place. And then Jane did mention, by the way, she does look forward to our show, and we look forward to always seeing you here as well. So,
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like I have yet to see a spring training game in Phoenix, but it's a big deal because I have so many friends that are still really big into baseball. I mean, I'm actually a baseball fan too. I actually have a bunch of things that sit over here on my desk. So I'm not going to grab everything that's sitting over here. But anyhow, like I played baseball as a kid. Johnny Bench was my favorite player, and I was obviously I'm a big Cincinnati Reds fan. You know, whether they're good or not doesn't matter to me. I still support them. So and it's weird because I've actually gone down to Phoenix for seminars and stuff, and I've had to drive by like the where the A's, Oakland A's and stuff play and everything, and it's crazy because it's just like they have their own little stadium here, and it's just so weird because I remember hearing stories, and when you drive by it, you go, wow, so they're serious about this. There's the logo, big as daylight, you know what I mean, on the side of this huge building. It's like they really play here. Okay. And it's a much larger presence in Phoenix when spring training is going on than I think a lot of people would realize. There's like so many games going on. It's crazy. So,
and the other thing is spring training was cut short because of the pandemic. So that's another thing that, you know, for a lot of the people out here, would be kind of a cool thing if they ended up doing all the games down in Arizona, you know, because obviously you can't go to the game, but it still would be cool. I think it would still be cool. And I'm not a big baseball fan. I don't like watching baseball on TV, quite frankly. I would rather go to a game in person. I don't really like watching it on TV. It's not entertaining to me on TV. But for a lot of people, it is. And in the absence of anything else, sure, people are going to watch it. You know, if there's nothing else on, especially with sports. I mean, sports are at a standstill right now. So it would be interesting to me. And it is interesting to me that WWE is still going and UFC is planning to go, you know, very soon. We'll see how that works.
Well, it'll be interesting.
Josh did mention, you know, the curve may be hitting a plateau, but a plateau does not mean it's gone, just controlled. You need no new infections for at least twice the length of time for incubation before you can say it's gone. And Josh, I was mentioning the historical parallel of the flu of 1918. We don't want to get too deep into that, but that did occur in multiple waves. I think a lot of us understand that. A lot of us understand it. The only thing I would argue is that rather than just try to do everything all at once, some sort of a phased plan seems like it should be in order, and that would be the way to go rather than just go all at once. I saw a cool picture from the Spanish flu of 1918 that showed a professional baseball game and everybody's wearing masks, which was one of the reasons I did the gag at the beginning of the show. Was I want to encourage people to wear masks because I think it's very important. And during the Spanish flu of 1918, it was pretty much mandatory in the United States in many places. And there's all these images, and there's one of a baseball game being played, and they're all masked up while they're playing the game. So food for thought.
Interesting. So do you have anything else for pop culture news, or?
Let me do one more for pop culture news because this one's not that. There's not a lot to this article. It's just something kind of cool just to talk about. This is a fairly recent article from Screen Rant that's dated April 6th. It just says, what to expect from Orville Season 3. Says the Orville Season 3 is happening. Here's what you need to know for the next run of Seth MacFarlane's comedy, including when it might release. So we got a nice, good picture there of the Orville cast. I think Dave and I are very interested in reviewing episodes of the Orville in the future. At this point, I think we're just waiting for it to get a little bit closer until Season 3. So it says, here's what to expect from the Orville Season 3, including when it might release and what its story could be. Created by Seth MacFarlane, who also stars in the series as Captain Ed Mercer. And they talk about the cast. It says, heavily inspired by Star Trek, the staff of the Orville is similar to the ones included in that franchise, with the captain being joined by a first officer, who's also his ex-wife, a second officer, a chief medical officer, a helmsman, who's also the captain's best friend, and a security chief. The Orville Season 2 saw the crew face down new alien threats while Ed and Kelly move closer together once more, with the latter accepting to go on a second date with him. And by the way, that's when I got into Orville, was actually in the middle of season 2. I have not seen the first season of the Orville. It says, with things nicely poised for the Orville season 3, fans have been wondering what the current status of the show is. Fox had renewed the Orville for season 3 as of May 2019. The plans for the show have changed since then. It says, here's the latest on season 3 of the Orville. Fans can rejoice now because the Orville season 3 is happening. The show will not be quietly disappearing forever, although it will be leaving Fox. Instead, Hulu has stepped in and picked up the series for 11 episodes with a longer running time, adding about 10 minutes to each. McFarlane announced the new deal at San Diego Comic-Con in July of 2019. Both Hulu and Fox are owned by Disney, so it should be a seamless move for cast and crew. The Orville season 3 has started production, but an actual release date for the renewed show has not been announced. Part of the delay is due to the actual production of episodes. McFarlane said that the Orville had become more ambitious over time, causing it to take longer to finalize and deliver episodes per variety. It was generally expected that the Orville season 3 would be available on Hulu by late 2020. However, as with many series and movies, the pandemic has caused production delays. McFarlane is proud of the show's episodic storytelling, so look for more of that in the Orville season 3. He's also said that the upcoming series will cement the Orville as its, quote, own animal, and not just a Star Trek-inspired space show per Syfy Wire. Of course, the move to Hulu means that the series is no longer obliged to meet restrictive broadcast standards, so more adult themes could come into play in season 3. There are very few details out there regarding what's in the actual scripts for the Orville season 3. But co-producer and editor Tom Constantino said to Trek Zone, there will be a continuation of things we care about, characters we care about. He also added that writers would address previous fan complaints in the Orville season 3. Finally, if season 2 was any indication, the comedy will focus less on jokes and continue to develop more dramatic plots. So there isn't a ton of meat to this article, but this last line is the one that I'm kind of focusing on. It says that the comedy will focus less on jokes and continue to develop more dramatic plots. So, Dave, what do you think of this? I know you've watched more Orville than me. Do you think that's the way the Orville should be going?
Well, I think that one of the things that's been nice is because the show does have comedy as a part of its core component, I think it has helped, I think, those of us as viewers who love the Orville, for us to connect to the characters a little bit more. You know what I mean? You get a more rounded, nuanced interpretation or impression about who that character is. And you click with them a lot faster. You know, but that also, in all honesty, could just be the writing. I enjoyed Orville season 1. I was blown away by season 2. And the Orville is probably the best. Like, if you love classic Star Trek, it's the closest thing to classic Star Trek on television. But at the same point, too, I would say already in season 2, you can see how the Orville is its own thing. It's not just a Trek spinoff or a Trek parody, you know, or a Trek-inspired show. It has it at its core, so it gives you kind of like a foundation to build upon. But at the same time, it's very much its own thing, in my mind anyway. They maybe feel like that maybe within the general public, that isn't quite cemented. As far as the idea of less comedy and more dramatic elements, the show's been moving in that direction anyway. It's interesting because I think season 1, I think, has more obvious comedy in it. And then season 2 has a little bit less. But the thing that's really great about season 1 and season 2 is that they're tackling things that's very relevant and very much being talked about right now, but in a sci-fi futuristic kind of way. I was shocked when, they talk about the idea of popularity on the internet. They did one all about porn addiction. I mean, they're not afraid to tackle some big issues and some interesting topics. And what's interesting too about the Orville too is a lot of things that certain groups hold up and talk about that Discovery did really well, or that Picard did really well. Well, the Orville's done it in spades and come at it without flinching, and done it and handled it in a much more, even though it was comedy, a much more nuanced, sophisticated way to begin with, and a more rounded approach and view of it as well. And so I've been kind of surprised that the Orville doesn't have more champions in its corner, when you consider that the things that everyone is celebrating Discovery for doing, and I like Discovery, I think the Orville actually does better. So I think if they choose to focus on more dramatic storytelling and dramatic elements, the show lives and breathes in that element very well. So I think that this cast and crew can do it. But I do hope that we still keep some of the comedic moments, because the Isaac and Gordon practical joke episode, everyone still talks about. So I hope that they don't get away from that too much, because I do feel like the comedy is an important component. But when you look at the two-parter, like Identity Part 1 and Part 2, which is all about, and PJ, if he's still watching, can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Identity Part 1 and Part 2 is the one that focuses on the Kalons and Isaac and his homeworld. What they did with those episodes, it was so well done. And in terms of just action, just the space battle alone, I've been telling people, it's like, if you're looking for something new to watch and you haven't seen all of the Orville and you have a subscription to Hulu, why aren't you watching the Orville right now? Because, man, that space battle in Part 2 is killer, and it is fun. And it is just like, if you love Star Trek type space battles, like if you love, man, that battle in Part 2 is awesome. So I think, in all honesty, I would trust this cast and crew to do anything they want to do. If they want to do some more dramatic stuff, I think they could totally pull it off. So that's my opinion. I think even if they choose to go that route, this cast and crew has already earned my trust that if they want to do it, I bet they'll do it really well.
Well, I have three concerns from this article, three red alerts, basically. Because the takeaways I got is, and by the way, I don't know if Screen Rant really has, like, quote unquote inside information. They're surmising things, I think, based actually on quotes that were made to other publications and other things and putting them into a different context. But the things that I'm concerned about is because these are the things that I like about the show and what got me into it. The first episode that got me into the Orville was the one where Isaac basically decides to date one of the human crew members. And for anybody that doesn't know, Isaac is a robot. So the thing was that it was basically straight out of Next Generation, and it was just like an episode in TNG where Data was trying to have a relationship. And I got sucked in immediately because I knew where I was, kind of the opposite of The Witcher. A show that I wasn't watching, I fit into it right away. And then you talked about what happened later with the Kalons. That's like the high point of the series to me, of the episodes that I've seen.
Yeah.
That story arc was awesome. In fact, it's going to relate to our second topic, which is Battlestar Galactica. And you talk about not necessarily being all Trek. That's straight out of Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, by the way.
Right.
But actually, no, that's not true. It's actually straight out of the classic Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, it is.
Myself. It's not straight out of the Ron Moore. It's straight out of the classic Battlestar Galactica. Was the story of the Kalons. It sounded a lot like Cylons.
Yeah.
So they've already incorporated other elements. But the thing is, I do not want less Trek. I want more Trek, because I think this is the only Trek show on the air right now that's making new episodes. So I do not want less Trek. I want more Trek, or at least keeping it the same Trek, Don't break it if it ain't, don't fix it if it ain't broken. Don't fix it if it ain't broken. I want to keep the level of Trek. That'll keep me engaged. It'll keep me knowing where I'm at. I think it will help with a lot of the dissatisfied Trekkies right now that are pissed off with Discovery and even more pissed off with Picard, which there are legions of pissed off Trekkies right now that hate Picard. So I think it'll help with that. The other thing is they talked about this idea that, oh, well, now they don't have to really deal with the censorship. Well, that sounds like Picard. Picard, that's straight out of Shaban's mouth. Like, oh, well, the reason that, they didn't curse in Star Trek is because of the censorship. So they should curse like sailors now. And so I'm not really looking forward to that. And then, finally, at the end, the less comedy. I think they have the right mix of comedy and drama. A lot of people already call it a dramedy. I would want it to continue down that path. So again, I would say my basic takeaway is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep the amount of Trek you have now. keep the language and the tone that you have now, and keep the mix of comedy and drama. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
No, and I don't. In all honesty, I don't think they're going to mess too much with the foundation of what the show is. I think by that they're just talking about that they. I think there might be some things that they might want to do that might be slightly different, because there are some episodes that feel like extensions and re-examinations of next gen episodes, and I love those.
The one I talked about, that's straight up what it is. There's another episode where the helmsman falls in love with a holodeck character just straight out of Geordi. You know what I mean? They do it a different way. I love those episodes. That's my point. So I want more of that. I want to see more remakes of next gen episodes. I want to see remakes of TOS episodes, even Voyager, Enterprise. I'm sure they could do all that stuff better. You know what I mean? Or do it not necessarily better, but in their own unique way that'll make this old story fresh and new again. You know what I mean?
Right.
And make it fun. So that's what I want to see more of. I don't want to see less Trek. I want to see what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Well, and I see what you're saying, but kind of along those same lines, I think you could see that in the two-parter like Identity, where you have what they did with the Kalons. That doesn't really come from a particular next-gen episode. That's almost sort of
like I said, I thought that was BSG. I thought that was straight up classic.
Well, that's what
BSG.
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That is a departure from Trek in a lot of ways, but it was very fun. So that's what I'm saying. It's like I've seen them do so much interesting work that until I see them make a huge misstep, I'm willing to trust their judgment on what they're doing. They have so many great episodes. I've been just thoroughly impressed with what they've done. The episode where Alara goes home, I mean, that episode is so good. And then you turn around and you look at I don't remember the name of the episode, but it's the one where the shuttle crashes and it's Isaac and the doctor and her kids and they get separated. Man, that episode's really good. That episode to me felt more like an episode you would have seen of Buck Rogers in the 25th century. It wasn't really Star Trek. It felt like a fun episode of Buck Rogers, So that's what I'm saying. I think they've kind of already started doing that. And I think all they're doing is they're just giving themselves the freedom that they can turn around and they can borrow from other science fiction.
Well, they've already done that.
Ideas.
Again, that's my point, Dave. They've already done that. I'm saying leave it where it's at. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Leave it where it's at. I don't want to see less Trek. I don't want to see less comedy. And I don't want to see more cursing. Just leave it the way it is and keep it on the path that's already going.
Well,
I don't need more of or less of any of those things.
Well, and all I'm going to say is that last paragraph that's on there, I do think that's kind of speculation. So no, I don't know.
I agree because they're not quoting interviews from their own. Yeah, they're not quoting their own interviews. They're quoting other people's interviews.
And so for people
I'm sure it's speculation. Yeah.
And for people that are curious, I would say, Tom Constantino is actually on Twitter and he posts quite a bit. And he's been posting like fun, like behind the scenes stuff for some of the episodes that we've already seen, like previs stuff and then the final shot. But he's also been occasionally like, showing like, current production stuff, like, we wrap filming this scene, and you'll see like a picture of some people in, costumes and makeup and stuff. And everything I've been getting from his Twitter tells me that it's going to be very much what we've seen. And I don't think they're going to mess with the formula too much. I just think that they're kind of excited to tell, more fun and interesting stories. That's what I get from him, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So,
well, I hope you're right. I hope that's how it goes.
Very cool. All right. So do you have anything else for pop culture news, or are we ready to move on?
No, I think we can move on to Streaming Wars.
Okay. All right. So I've got the graphic up if you choose to share it. All right. So here we are. We're getting into the Streaming Wars. So in the Streaming Wars segment, we talk about things that are happening that are interesting in the world of streaming. Particularly, we're talking about, live streaming or streaming entertainment. We're talking about things like Netflix, Disney Plus, any one of these, Hulu, the Peacock, whenever that does or doesn't happen, any of these fun, interesting streaming outlets, whether we're also talking about some of the free services, such as, Pluto TV, or even something like Crackle or Tubi. So tell me, Eric, what did you find that was interesting for this week's segment of the Streaming Wars?
Well, we've talked about them a little bit before. We had a new player come into the Streaming Wars recently. So this is a CNET article dated April 6th. Headline reads, Quibi, which, by the way, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I apologize. Quibi versus Peacock versus HBO Max versus Disney Plus versus Apple TV Plus versus Netflix. How streaming stacks up. It says, with the launch of Quibi, NBC's Peacock, and HBO Max this spring, you'll have more streaming choices than ever, and our guide breaks them down. So again, Quibi has just basically joined the Streaming Wars within the last week or so. They just started. So it says Disney Plus has arrived. Apple TV Plus has picked up its first round of awards. And new services such as NBC Comcast Peacock and AT&T's HBO Max are just around the corner. As the list of services continue to grow from the, quote, old days of just Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Hulu, Disney's other platform, you'll be forgiven for thinking there was a new service every week, which right now that's kind of what it feels like. April adds yet another new option, Quibi. The brainchild of DreamWorks co-founder Jerry Katzenberg and led by former HP CEO Meg Whitman, Quibi is a new take on streaming with a mobile-only approach. It's available now in the US and Canada on iOS and Android for $4.99 a month with ads, and $7.99 a month ad-free, with original shows that have episodes running 10 minutes or less. Yes, you heard that right. They have original shows with episodes running 10 minutes less. And again, mobile only. Mobile only. We have discussed before how YouTube dominates that particular area. I mean, completely dominates it over even Netflix. But this is what Quibi is coming up with. What's interesting is Quibi is doing their own shows, these very sort of short shows, 10-minute shows, and they're charging. So basically what they're doing is they're going to become sort of somewhat of a paid version, a premium version of YouTube. It's a really interesting gamble. And could actually, if it takes off, it could be a bad thing for creators such as myself and Dave, quite frankly. So they kind of break down all the different services that as far as what they're planning to do, what their price points are, and all that kind of stuff. This is a pretty good article to show you where they are right now. So like they talk about here, streaming compared. They've got Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Quibi, and Peacock, which Peacock is a little cut out, unfortunately, but that's just the way my computer displays it. So they're talking about monthly price. So let's talk price. Let's talk business here, right? So Netflix starts out at $8.99 a month, basically $9 a month. Amazon Prime Video starts out about the same, $8.99 or it's included with $120 a year Prime membership, which of course the Prime membership of Amazon gives you other benefits like free shipping. Disney Plus is lower. That's basically $7 a month. HBO Max, which hasn't come out yet, they're going to be $15 a month. $15. Quibi, which just came out, is $5. But again, it's a very different kind of network because they're going to be doing these 10-minute shows, which I'm kind of curious what they're going to be like. But to be honest with you, I have no interest in supporting that. As far as ads go, Netflix has no ads. Amazon Prime has no ads. Disney Plus has no ads. HBO Max has no ads. Quibi does, which is also interesting because they have the ad-based option. And Peacock, which is over here on the end, they're also going to have an ad-based option. They also have a premium option. So as far as availability, obviously Netflix is out, Amazon is out, Disney is out, HBO Max is not coming out till May 20th. Quibi just came out, and Peacock is going to be starting April 15th for Comcast. In other words, if you have a Comcast subscription, you can get Peacock. I'm sorry, you can get Peacock then. It won't roll out for the rest of us until July 15th. I had been hoping and kind of thinking they would come out early because of the pandemic, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Oh, and then we also have Apple TV over here. They're $5 a month. In a lot of ways, it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways, Dave and I actually have kind of forgotten about Apple TV consistently because I don't think we've had much interest in it. And it just hasn't generated a whole lot of buzz. So we keep going down the list here of the different features of the different streaming services. As far as actual content or supported devices, I'm sorry, this is interesting. So obviously Apple, is not supported on Android devices. Quibi obviously will be because it's meant for your phone. As far as like being supported by iOS app, which of course is a mobile device, that's the mobile platform for Apple. Pretty much everybody across the board supports that, which is kind of interesting because Apple is obviously not available for Android, Apple TV, but Quibi is going to be available as a mobile platform on both. There's other platforms such as Roku that most of these will be supporting. Again, Quibi, because it's mobile only, it will not support Roku. It will not support Amazon Fire TV. It will not support Apple TV, obviously. It's not going to support Android TV. It's not even going to support Chromecast, which I think is really crazy that Quibi is not supporting Chromecast, because I would definitely be more interested in a mobile platform that I could cast to my TV. Xbox One, again, Quibi is not supporting. Apple obviously doesn't. And of course, my favorite way of streaming is PlayStation 4, which is not supported by either Apple or Quibi, but is supported by everybody else, all those other big players. There's also these promotions in terms of money, which is very, very important to people right now. Netflix does have a promotion where they're included with T-Mobile Magenta. Disney is free for you Verizon customers. HBO Max will be bundled with AT&T Unlimited and more. Quibi is included with T-Mobile Magenta or plans with 2 lines or more if you have T-Mobile. Apple TV Plus is free for a year with a new iPhone, Mac, iPod. So any Apple product, basically you get Apple TV free for a year. And Peacock is premium with ads included for free to Comcast or Cox customers. So that's basically your breakdown of how these different services that are currently out or very soon going to come out, the major players, and how they're going to work. So I'm kind of curious, Dave, did you even realize Quibi had come out yet?
I know Quibi had come out because I'd seen some stuff for it. I'll be honest with you, this is another one of the services I don't care about at all. It's not on my radar. A lot of my decisions when it comes to streaming content, when it comes to streaming services, and there was a Freudian slip, is all based off of content. What do you have that you're offering? And then based off what you're offering, I'll make a determination whether or not I want to support whatever it is you're doing. I've mentioned before, the only thing on Apple TV that had my interest was the Snoopy in Space show, because I'd still kind of like to watch that. That's what they had. By the time they started pushing it and promoting it, I'd moved on. When I look at Netflix, for example, I keep thinking it's like, now's the time to get rid of Netflix. Well, here's season 3 of Ozark. So Mike and I are working our way through season 3 of Ozark. I really like Ozark. So,
and we just did Witcher. And we just did Witcher,
and
we just agreed to do one more episode of Witcher. So,
so
can't get rid of Netflix right now. So
yeah, so that's kind of the thing. It's like Netflix always has something new and interesting, either in the pipeline or it comes out. And now sometimes you don't know anything about it. Like everybody's going on about the crazy Tiger Man show, whatever that show is. I don't want to watch that. I know Carol
you don't want to review it on the show? I was going to pitch that for the next show.
I don't know. That's going to be a tough sell. But anyhow, but that's how for example, like DC Universe has been plugging me every day. The second season of the new Harley Quinn animated series actually started, I think, yesterday or the day before yesterday. So they had just finished their first season, and now here's season 2 already. We don't talk about DC Universe very much, but there's a service I used to subscribe to that I'm this close to pulling the trigger on signing back up for again if I'm going to do another service right now. So as far as Quibi is concerned, I'm just not interested. I'm not looking for another pay service, especially something that's mobile only. We're creating original content. It's 10-minute episodes, and it's going to cost me how much? I can watch interesting 10-minute stuff right now for YouTube for free. Like, why would I see people doing interesting stuff right now on Facebook that's longer than that for free. Some people are watching us right now. We're an hour and 51 minutes into our show for free on Facebook. I don't know why you would pay for it, especially when you have really great services right now. When you look at things like Pluto TV, when you look at things like Crackle, they've got a lot of mainstream major studio content that's available. There's so much going on in the free space right now. I'm not interested in another pay service right now. Now I am curious to see what's going to happen with HBO Max, because Warner Brothers has a lot of content that I love. So again, because my decisions are based on content, there might be something happening there that appeals to me. But for a pay service with stuff I don't know what it is, I'm not interested. I'm not interested.
By the way, Bobby says, retro reaction for Tiger King. Not going to lie, I would love to tune in next week and see your faces. That's what I keep being, Bobby, that's what everybody keeps telling me. They're like, it's like people are describing it to me like almost like a train wreck, and you just have to keep watching because I've seen what a phenomenon it's become, and I haven't watched it. I haven't watched any of it. So
I haven't seen any of it either.
So I'm just kind of like, I know it's become like a cultural phenomenon at this point. It's been a big quarantine stream kind of thing where people have been getting this because they're stuck at home. So, but you were talking about as far as paying, and that's something that we've been trying to talk about quite a bit. In fact, it's what's going to lead to our next main segment as far as why we're doing the quarantine streams and why we're picking the content we're picking and where it's being shown. But there's another article I have here that gets right into that, and this is pretty interesting. So this article, which is not displaying very well, but this article over here, this is a CNBC article. This is dated 3 days ago. Headline reads, "The streaming wars may be put on hold during quarantines as free content takes over." So exactly what you were talking about, Dave, as far as this issue of free content. And this author has a really interesting take on where they think the industry is now as a result of the pandemic. It says quarantines have boosted streaming video usage, but spiking job losses may not bode well for subscription video services. Big media companies have started to offer free video offerings for content that is typically paywalled. User-generated free services like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube may ultimately be the winners over all subscription services. This goes exactly into what you were just saying, Dave. It says, back in our salad days, back when we were young and innocent, back on March 11th, it says, I wrote a column about how coronavirus quarantines could be an ideal time for subscription streamers like Quibi, HBO Max, and NBC's Peacock, all of which plan to launch in some form in April and May. After all, streaming video usage would surely increase with everyone stuck at home with few entertainment options. We've talked about this, Dave, the idea that this could be the golden age of streaming. What I didn't consider, says the article, is just how dramatic the explosion of job losses would be. With more than 10 million Americans filing for jobless claims in 2 weeks and the unemployment rate jumping to its highest point since August 2017. Those numbers are just a hint of what's to come. That's made me consider how many Americans are going to jump at spending any extra money on streaming services while they're stuck at home. Instead of cementing subscription streaming services into daily life habits, it's possible quarantines will actually showcase the value of free streaming, particularly user-generated content, like what we're doing right now, Dave. With so many people staying home, we're all going to see a lot more media consumption. That's from Adam Mosier. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Instagram's chief executive officer. And he said that at the Briar's Market on the Briar's Market podcast last month. Quote, more of the new content, if staying at home lasts months, and I think it will come from people and not studios over time.
Well, I've been surprised and honestly kind of amazed and flattered by the sheer number of people who've just been tuning in just to watch me draw. You know, I mean, now I'm trying to provide, professional advice, content, because I answer questions, whatever questions people have. So, as I'm demonstrating the techniques that I use when I'm creating sketch cards, these are the same, techniques and things that you could use in order to, get a sketch card gig, or do a commission for someone. So there is a professional outlet for that in terms of they are sort of like mini tutorials, if you will, of how I work and whatever. But at the same point too, I've just been amazed at how many people have just enjoyed, watching me draw. So, and I see more and more people producing content like that. People that were not really, in this, for example, the Joe Kubert School, which is the Kubert School of Cartoon and so I forget what they call it. Basically, they teach sequential art there. It's the Kubert School, which was founded by Joe Kubert, legendary comic book creator. The Kubert School for years and years and years, as far back as I can remember, has been the standard. If you wanted to learn how to draw comics, if you wanted to be a professional, that was the school that you went to, that you learned and you honed your chops and you went out into the world. I always wanted to go to the Kubert School in New Jersey. For one reason or another, it just never worked out. But I did take summer institutes and such from them over the years, and met some of the faculty and have taken classes and learned, but never actually been on campus. They have recently started streaming a lot of things. That they're usually every Saturday in the summer they would do free art classes for kids. So on Saturdays the school was open to the public. You could show up with kids. You didn't have to bring any art supplies or anything, and they would give free drawing lessons. Well, they've started doing those online, streaming them live. Now they've bridged out, and now they're kind of doing what we're doing. They're using live streaming as a method to interview different professional creators and stuff in order to build the channel up, right? To make people more aware of the school and what they have to offer and what it is they do there. And, I know people are watching that. So there's all kinds of things that are happening right now. They have nothing to do with the studios, that are just people connecting, you know what I mean, on some kind of level. And it's kind of interesting. And I think in some ways it's probably, to an extent, for some people, probably more meaningful, you know, and it's more sharing in the moment with each other as opposed to just watching something. You know, it's more interactive.
Yeah, and as
more...
we did talk about that last week with the Kubert School, and if anybody's interested in that, we do have clips in the previous episode available on the YouTube or the other streaming options. You can watch the entire episode. But there's a clip specifically dealing with the Kubert School. But getting back to the bigger picture here, it actually kind of complements a lot of what you're saying. It says, but as quarantines move into April, Americans will revalue how they spend their free time, especially if they're jobless and unable to visit friends and family. It says that's likely to benefit entertainment options with personal interaction and instant response from friends, such as internet-connected video games, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. My kids love TikTok, and YouTube. I'm not sure there's any content I'd rather watch right now than the Marsh family's at-home rendition of One More Day from Les Miserables. That's the author speaking. I don't know that particular show, but he has like a little picture here of that family, and I guess them singing Les Miserables. And by the way, this image here reminds me completely of the kind of stuff my kids watch, because they'll just watch families going off and doing things, going on trips, and they'd be totally into that kind of stuff. It says that the top 3 applications by usage on Verizon's network in March were YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, according to a Verizon spokesman. Another one is Instant and Fresh, documenting at-home life, while on-demand Hollywood shows will fill an escapism niche, but may feel less immediate and more anachronistic as quarantines continue. In other words, they're going to get more and more out of date. You know, I question, does anybody really want to watch Picard right now with everything the way it is and watch that depressing crap? I can't imagine why you would want to watch that. And by the way, that's the problem with them trying to be topical, which they weren't, by the way. Epic fail. Has nothing to do with Brexit. Epic fail. But that's the problem with trying to be topical, because it's not topical anymore. It's no longer topical. Nobody cares.
Right.
So the need to connect with people, you know, is going to continue to exist, and the need to be entertained is going to continue to exist. But the distribution time between one and the other will shift. Turnaround time is a key problem. Now, this is what's really interesting. This is also something I want your take on. The problem with free ad-based services is they still require ads. And global advertising is expected to go through a giant slump as the economy recedes. The Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity, the most important annual global ad conference, was canceled on Friday as customers' priorities have shifted to the need to provide people to serve consumers with essential items and to focus on preserving company, society, and economies. While running a business that relies only on advertising revenue isn't a good place to be in a downturn, see all digital companies. If you're Instagram or Google or Facebook, and you have already achieved massive global scale, cementing your products in the daily routines of people's lives is likely more important than short-term declines in advertising revenue. In other words, the idea is that even if they do have an ad hit, they're still going to be concentrating on basically what they've been doing all along, because they know that they can take the hit. So they talk about big media companies that are trying to come up with these free options, which I talked about a little bit before in the previous article, as a way that they're trying to do to mitigate things. Because one of the things I had pointed out previous to the pandemic was the idea that something like the Peacock might have an advantage because they have a free ad-based version of Peacock. But basically what this article is arguing and trying to say is Peacock may get destroyed before it even begins, even with the ad-based option, because nobody is going to have the money to put ads into that. And if they have money to put ads, they're going to go with the proven players like Google and Facebook and Instagram. So it's kind of interesting. We're looking at a situation right now where basically all of the big players could be in jeopardy, and some of the big players that haven't even come out yet, they may be just dead on arrival. So the other thing that they point out is that the streaming services that already have a significant market share, and therefore people have already budgeted for it, and that's like services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and even to some extent Disney Plus, which has had pretty decent numbers as far as subscriptions. They kind of break it down here. It says Netflix more than anyone, with more than 160 million global subscribers and with about 60 million US subscribers. Amazon Prime, 150 million members worldwide. Disney, about 30 million. And they also mentioned that HBO has about 35 million US subscribers. So we basically got Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney, and HBO as far as the big players. He says that's 4 subscription services in a world where it was predicted only 4 or 5 would survive. Because we've talked about that before, Dave, as well. That's what I think is really interesting. So basically, this article is saying we may already see the blueprint in the wake of the pandemic, that basically it's going to be, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, possibly HBO, maybe one other service, and the rest of them are going the way of the dodo practically before they ever even took off.
Well, and I mean, it makes sense. It kind of makes sense. I guess the part that I always find interesting is in this equation. They mentioned Facebook at one point, but then they don't really come back to it, because I do think Facebook has a role to play in this. They've been pushing Facebook Watch. I've noticed like on Hulu and stuff. Of course, we're streaming live on Facebook and Twitter and Twitch, and I don't know. I think that I'm curious to see where we're going to be. But I can see the logic of a lot of what they point out. The idea that the ad-based services may be DOA if there's no one there to buy ads. But then at the same point too, like I'm trying to grow the audience for this show, and I have been buying some, limited run ads, on Facebook, for example, trying to increase the exposure for the show and kind of try and, grow our audience, So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But I think that, you mentioned it before, we talked a little bit more about YouTube, and the kind of independent user created content that's clicking with people more. They mention that in this article, but they don't give that a lot of stock. They don't talk too much about it. And I do think that's going to play a larger role as we move forward than I think anyone's realizing.
This article has a pro user-based creator slant to it.
Right.
But he says that's basically where, and actually the executive is saying that, like the executive from Instagram is saying that's kind of where we're going to. The longer people are isolated and in quarantine, the better off user-based content's going to be, because they can create new content where the studio system's not equipped to do that. Like right. We have seen things where, like, for instance, a lot of the talk show people, they're doing what we're doing now. Some of them with less production values than we have. Like Jimmy Kimmel's, I don't know if you've seen Jimmy Kimmel's show at all. It looks terrible to me. So, and then on the other side of that, you have like, I don't like these guys, so I don't really watch them. But the one on ABC, he used to be on that show with, I can't remember his name. His production values actually look better than ours. I mean, they look really good. Like he's got some sort of home studio going or something like that, So they're trying to manage this, right? Even people there. In a talk show format, obviously, that's pretty much what we're doing. So a talk show format can be adapted. It's just whether these hosts can do it, right? But
right.
Other content, Hollywood content, they're screwed right now. Like, they cannot adapt, you know what I mean, into creating that user-based content without going into a studio. That's where the big connect is. So the longer this whole thing keeps going, what they're trying to say is they're screwed. The traditional Hollywood type stuff is just screwed because they're not going to be able to turn around new content. We did talk about in a previous Streaming War segment that of the studios, Netflix has the most content in the bank and it probably has the most ability to weather the storm. But they're one of the companies that this article is basically claiming is going to be one of the winners. That they're gonna make it through this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We do have a comment here. It's an interesting question, and it does relate to the industry as a whole. And the question is, do you think movie theaters are going to survive? I saw an article on CNBC that AMC may not make it out of this. And then also he says, since movies are now going direct to release through the streaming services, which is another point. My personal take on that is, I don't know. I mean, I think that they're going to take a major hit, and I think theaters were having problems to begin with. I actually looked at I was going to kind of bring it up, and I realized, maybe it's kind of mean. I was actually going to bring up the box office numbers in our pop culture segment and decided not to, because I kind of I thought maybe we could put like a funny spin on it. But I was like, nah, it's kind of depressing when you see like a country's entire box office revenue is like $700.
Right.
And I thought maybe we could play with that, but I decided it was kind of in poor taste. So I decided not to go there. But to answer that question, that's where some of these places are at right now. Interestingly enough, in the Phoenix metro area, we still have one theater open, which is the drive-in. Drive-in movie theaters have been allowed to stay open, which those were dinosaurs. So wouldn't that be interesting if drive-in movies came back? Hey, you got to adapt. That's my message. So if the movie theaters want to adapt, maybe AMC should look into making some drive-in movie theaters. That's an option. Got to adapt.
Well, here's the thing. We were looking at a much larger shift to digital release in homes at the very beginning of this. Like, we were looking at a pretty major push. We had a couple things kind of come out early, some of which was already in theaters and was already suffering from what was happening. And then there was talk, Universal announced everything was just gonna come out digital, for the theaters that were open, it would be there too. But they were just gonna do day and date in theater and digital. And there was a lot of speculation about what was going to happen with Black Widow, what was going to happen with, Maverick, like all these other big films coming up. And if we were going to go ahead and move in that direction. And pretty much the majority of the studios basically put their foot on the brakes. Everything's basically been pushed out till 2021 at this point. Pretty much all the major releases have been. So, in a sense, the thing that could really have pushed a move towards, digital in-home first release for major motion pictures has basically been put on hold. So I think that everyone's just going to try and wait it out. What's going to happen is depending upon how long this takes, what other things occur in the midst of it, then we'll have a better sense of what may or may not need to happen. At the moment, the studios have basically put their foot on the brakes, and we're just going to wait until 2021 and see where we are. Wouldn't you agree, Eric? That kind of seems like what's basically happened at this point.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the exception being Universal, that seems to be interested in doing streaming releases. So what you're seeing is, I think that they're not all going to do the same thing. There isn't like an industry-wide playbook at this point. And Jane does mention that the drive-in in Memphis is open as well.
Oh,
and again, I think that's a matter of that kind of thing takes time. Obviously, if you were to start the drive-in movie theater industry again, it would take some time to do that. But is it possible? I think at this point it is. You just don't know. And again, my message is you have to adapt. You have to adapt to your circumstances right now, because you don't want to. It's not necessarily like AMC wants to go and start building drive-in movie theaters. But then again, maybe they should build a drive-in movie theater and see what happens. That's an idea. You know what I mean? Before they're dead. That's just an idea, you know?
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Like I said, I've just gotten the feeling that from a general standpoint for most of the studios, it seems like everyone's just kind of put their foot on the brakes and they're like, well, let's see where we are and then we'll reassess. Because that's kind of where I think America is right now. Well, let's see where we are and then we'll reassess. The question turns into, when does we will reassess turn into, okay, we need to do something? That's going to be the big, that will really determine what happens moving forward. So I think Eric's answer is the best answer. We don't know because basically no one's really wading into this full force except for Universal. And even though Universal said, we're just going to go straight and just release, they haven't been doing it with everything. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see.
But Jess brings up a studio that needs money may have to release through stream and cannot afford to hold on to properties. And again, I talked about this earlier. You have this sort of corona effect that people use and screen for cover, but you're finding out now who might be in trouble. And Universal's been rumored to be in trouble for a long time. So maybe they're like, we got to get revenue. We can't wait this out. If we wait this out, we're dead. You know what I mean? So that's a possibility. And I could see that. I could see studios that are really hurting for cash. They're not going to sit on their content and say, we got to get it out some way. We got to get some money. We got to get some revenue going.
Well,
the same way that a lot of restaurants, you know, have decided to do delivery options that never did before because they know they need to get some revenue. They cannot wait out the storm. And then another comment from the Rogues Gallery, a drive-in would be great if there was new content to show. But there is. We still have stuff that was slated to come out. You know what I mean? Like we talked about, you know, Black Widow. I've heard Top Gun. There's a couple films that were slated to come out in the next few months for the summer releases. Right now, it looks like all the summer releases are being pushed back. But theoretically, if there was the infrastructure, it could be released in a drive-in or something like that, a theater that's actually open, you know? And then Bobby said that he agrees with James, says, you know, how long before production starts? And Bobby also laments that he's a little sad there because he loves the theater. And I agree with you. I love the theater experience as well. I'm a big theater guy. I like to see movies in the theater. I'm just like I am with comics. You know, I'm not a big digital comic guy, and I'm not big into watching movies digitally streaming at my house. I actually like going to the movie theater. I like seeing movies on the big screen. I think there's always going to be people that do. It's just a question of how do we do that in this environment.
Well, and I think too, you know, in all honesty, if Disney wanted to test the waters, for example, if they wanted to test the waters with a digital first release, they have a built-in ready to go thing that's just been sitting around forever that they might as well just pull the trigger on, and that would be the New Mutants film. The New Mutants film has been finished for years. You know, Fox was going to release it. They kept pulling it from the release slate. You know, then Dark Phoenix came out, didn't do very well, or Phoenix or whatever they called it. And then they pulled it back again. Then, of course, you know, Disney came in, bought Fox. You know, what's going to happen with New Mutants? There's a percentage of the fan base that wants to watch New Mutants. And it's new because it's like a superhero film, but it's a horror movie, you know, and that's finished. That's finished. Someone just needs to pull the trigger and release it. So if Disney wanted to roll something out just as a test case to see how it might do, they have a great specimen, a product, whatever, that they could release onto the world, unleash onto the world in New Mutants because it's finished. It doesn't really fit, in all honesty, actually with a lot of the other MCU movies anyway. I think it'd be better to do it right now just because then you don't have to answer a lot of confusion about, well, how does this fit in the MCU? Well, obviously it doesn't. You know, so we'll have to see what happens. But I think that there's a lot of possibility. There's some interesting films that the studios have that they can kind of, you know what I mean, do something with. If they want to test the waters, to do some digital release. Because there's some films I think could be fine to just go digital first or go, theater and then digital at the same time. And I don't think you'd lose a lot. Because they're not big spectacle films. You don't necessarily have to see those in the movie theater. And then there's other big spectacle films that you should see in the movie theater. You look at things like Endgame. You look at things like Infinity War. Obviously, the Star Wars movies. The big budget extravaganza films that, I'm not a huge fan of some of the Transformers movies, but I liked Bumblebee. There's a lot of stuff like that belongs in the theater. That should have that kind of experience. But there's a lot of other smaller films too that, films like Vice or whatever that you could just release, at home and in theater at the same time, and it'd probably be fine. So we'll have to see. But I think the test product, if Disney wants to try this, they have it. It's New Mutants. It's sitting there. It has a built-in fan base. There's some people that want to see it. It's completed. It doesn't fit with the MCU because it feels like the MCU's been put on hold right now anyway. I think New Mutants, they should just release New Mutants right now and just get it over with and get down to the wild and see kind of what people think about it. Because if they're going to be dismissive of it, now is a great time to do it. Because they'd be like, oh, well, that was a film. We didn't really have a way to plot it on the release schedule. We had an opportunity. We released it digital. It doesn't count. And I don't think anyone would hold that against Disney. And it kind of gives them a way to release the mutants and just kind of get it done. So we'll see. We'll have to see what happens with that. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. And then James says, it's going to be a weird Academy Awards next winter. Yes, it probably will be. It definitely will be. It'll be curious to see. In a weird way, it'll be curious to see even what's eligible. Is there some possible Oscar contenders that some of the studios may decide to go ahead and pull the trigger if the films are finished and go ahead and just release them digital so people can see the performances and then at least have a sense for, what might be worth, rooting for. Because they release screener copies to the different guilds, the Actors Guild, the Screenwriting Guild, the, whatever else. And they in turn, vote on these various films, in different categories, directing, cinematography, acting, whatever. So they kind of see
talked about that. We talked about that on the last episode too, that it is going to be a weird Academy Award season for sure. I think there's no doubt that the Academy Awards are going to be weird next year.
Yeah. So, and I wonder if there's that possibility that there might be films that are just those obvious Oscar contender films. They might just go, oh, well, what the heck, pull the trigger. Let's roll it out, so, just so people can at least see it and they can make some revenue off of it because Oscar contender films typically don't earn a lot of cash anyway. So why not? So we'll see. And then James has a comment. He says, we get them for SAG.
I don't quite understand that comment, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't either. I know SAG stands for Screen Actors Guild, but I don't know if you might want to explain that. James might be connected in the industry in such a way that maybe he sees screener copies or something. I'm not sure. I don't.
Oh, we get in terms of you get copies for SAG. I understand that screeners.
Screeners.
Yep,
yeah. Okay.
Talking about screeners. Yep, I get you. Now I get you. Now I get what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah, the only thing anyone sends me anymore is occasionally if someone wants us to take a look at their book, they'll send us a free copy via email or whatever, and we can look at the digital copy and determine, whatever. I reviewed a few books like that when I was actually doing the audio only show by myself, and then we've only received, I think maybe 1 or 2 offers since we've gone to this live streaming format. But yeah, so it's interesting. Do you have anything else you want to cover for the streaming wars, Eric? Or are we good to move into our last topic for this evening?
No, I think it's time to get some BSG going on. We got to get that. Let's get it on, right?
Okay. All right. So if you want to put it up, I've got a graphic up here. All right. So let me set it up here just real quick. Okay, so on this segment of the show, we're going to be doing a retro retrospective for Battlestar Galactica. We're actually going to be talking about the remake, the one from 2004. We're specifically looking at the original miniseries. I think it was 2 parts, but we're looking specifically at the miniseries, the very first couple that I remember watching on Syfy back in the day. So we're going to do retro retrospective format, but we're going to talk about the way in which we viewed these, because we're trying to look at ways in which people can enjoy some of this content, watch it, for free at home on either one of these ad-based services or whatever, just to continue to encourage people to explore different alternatives during our quarantine stream special. So tell me, Eric, just to start off with, just briefly, how did you actually watch for this episode? How did you rewatch the Battlestar Galactica miniseries?
So I actually watch Comet quite a bit, and Comet is actually a broadcast subchannel. So generally, if you get it over the airwaves, you get it as a digital subchannel. A lot of broadcasters now broadcast multiple channels on their feed because we've gone to digital, because we use digital televisions now. So Comet TV is one of those kind of channels, but they also offer a streaming option. Actually, they offer multiple streaming options. One is you can go directly to their website and you can stream content on their show as it airs, just live broadcasts. I believe they also have a Roku app, so you can also do it on Roku. I believe they also are on Apple. They are not, as I understand, on Android. I don't believe there's a Comet Android app. And I can't. There's not one for PlayStation 4. I know that, which is, of course, one of the major ways that I stream. But there are multiple streaming. Also, Stir. Stir, I believe, carries Comet TV, and Stir is another free streaming app. So there's actually a variety of ways to see it. But the way that I watched it was on the broadcast version of Comet TV, which is a free ad-based digital subchannel. Which option did you choose, Dave?
Well, here's the thing. It has been, I think, kind of announced that Syfy is getting ready to do a marathon of Battlestar Galactica, of course, the remake. I think Tricia Helfer is actually going to be somehow involved with that, either setting them up or whatever, maybe with different segments. And
I think she does a podcast. I think she does. She actually does a podcast already, a BSG podcast.
Yeah. And then I know too that in addition to that, Syfy is also, for those people that are curious, they're also going to be doing the same thing with Xena. And then I think Lucy Lawless, or I forget who it is, someone's going to be involved with that one as well. So that these are going to be either concurrent or one right after the other, or whatever. They're going to be doing a marathon. So you will be able to watch this on Syfy, number one. So
and Syfy.com. Yeah, Syfy.com.
Right. Well, and I was going to say, that is originally what I was going to do. I was going to watch it on Syfy.com. Here is the issue I ran into. Okay. I couldn't find a simple way to stream it to my television. And it was driving me absolutely berserk. I don't like when I can't just watch something on my television. It drives me absolutely crazy. It's part of the reason I got rid of the DC Universe app, is because they had no simple way for me just to cast what I was paying to watch onto my television. I've got a big television. Why can't I just watch it on my television? It drives me nuts. So I actually just...
Dave, do you have a Chromecast? Do you have a Chromecast?
I do. But
okay.
Here's the issue. I'm having issues where sometimes it doesn't want to communicate right. It's having all kinds of issues. So anyhow, so what ended up happening was I had actually loaned out my season 1 of Battlestar Galactica like years and years ago, and I never got it back. Okay. So I had it on my phone at one point. I was trying to watch it one night, and I got really frustrated because it's too small. I don't mind listening to stuff like that, but if I want to watch it, I want to be able to see it, right? And so I started researching different options, and I ended up paying for it. I ended up just buying the miniseries. I bought the high def version. I bought it off of Google Play because I wanted to be able to see it. I really like this version of Battlestar Galactica, and I didn't want to have to re-experience it in a sort of like compromised form for the show. I don't want to watch it in a, for example, like sometimes with certain things we review on the show, your only real option is to watch it on YouTube, because it's not available on DVD. It's not available in a different media. And I just looked at my options like, I'm just going to buy it. I can watch the high def version. I like it anyway. I'm going to rewatch it. Why not? So that's what I ended up doing is I bought it and I ended up watching it on Google Play. So I was going to do it the other way, but like I said, I didn't want to watch it that's going to be my expression. I didn't want to watch it in a compromised form. So
no, I'm with you on that. I actually I don't like watching stuff on my laptop computer. I really don't. As I've said many times, I like having a PlayStation 4 app because then I can just watch it on my TV. That's the primary way that I like to utilize the apps. But like I said, in this case with Comet TV, all I have to do is set up an antenna and I can watch it for free on the big screen as it's broadcast. So that was the option that I chose.
Yeah. So use of the retrospective, we talk about how we first heard about, whatever it is that we're talking about. So this content, we're talking about the remake of Battlestar Galactica. So tell me, Eric, how did you first hear about this remake of Battlestar Galactica?
I need to just acknowledge the Rogues Gallery because Josh said Cylons rule. And I agree with you. Cylons rule, Colonials drool. But anyway, the funny thing about this is, I think I've talked about it in a previous episode, maybe when we actually did the audio only version of the show, and we talked about the original Battlestar Galactica. So there was a lot of controversy with this show, a lot of controversy at the time with classic BSG fans like myself. And to this day, I consider myself a classic BSG fan. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm probably going to express some very unpopular opinions in this retrospective about this iteration of Battlestar Galactica. Okay. So when this first came out, there was a lot of sore feelings. As I mentioned before, I used to actually go to San Diego Comic-Con pretty much every year. And I met Richard Hatch. And Richard Hatch was trying to get his own reboot, essentially. He was trying to get like a sequel series to Battlestar Galactica on the air. And he went so far as to basically create his own pitch video. He basically got a bunch of the cast members together, and what he did was he actually did a proof of concept trailer, which is exactly what I'm trying to do with one of my projects with Bad Bob Productions. He did a proof of concept trailer, had a lot of the original cast members in it, and was going to do an updated version of Battlestar Galactica with many of the original actors, along with a new generation of pilots that were going to take them forward into the next generation, if you will. I loved the pitch. I got goosebumps remembering what it was like in that theater that was packed. And I believe, Dave, you were there as well, but I don't think we knew each other yet. If I recall, Dave, you were actually in the room as well. And it was the intensity as a classic BSG fan was just incredible. The energy and all that kind of stuff. So I was very heavily a Richard Hatch supporter, and I was very into that concept and very excited about it. The next thing I remember happening was Bryan Singer, who had just done X-Men, totally pulled the rug out from under Richard Hatch, and he had a pitch going for his own version of Battlestar Galactica. That didn't happen. You're playing the second coming right now.
Yeah, I am.
This is Richard Hatch's pitch video. And again, this is kind of what I'm trying to do in my own career right now, is do sort of a proof of concept pitch video for a trailer for the movie that I'm trying to get financing for. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Gives me chills. Look, I still remember that, seeing that scene of the classic Cylon, you know, with the laser going across his face. It brings me back. And the late great Richard Hatch, the late great, there's so many good things you can say about him. You just I met him several times at San Diego Comic-Con. And so he did this video that you're watching right now. It was a total labor of love. I thought it was so badass. I really liked it. Gosh, you see, you know, the original Baltar. He got so many of the original actors involved and had new actors involved, young actors. To me, he was really doing it right. He was setting the model of what so many of us fans have wanted, where we wanted a bridge where, yes, we can do new characters, new stories, but we want that bridge with the old characters. And so much of what we're doing now is, quite frankly, the way they decided to go. So what ended up happening, of course, is Bryan Singer's project didn't get anywhere. And eventually, Ron D. Moore, who I respect immensely for his work on Deep Space Nine, and I also think he got the shaft for Voyager. In fact, his version of Battlestar Galactica in many ways is an answer to Voyager. A lot of people don't know that. And it was also a little bit of it was also a little bit of a disparagement on Enterprise, and I'll get into that with the full retrospective. But the thing is, I had a lot of mixed feelings, and what ended up happening was, when it first was aired, I refused to watch it. I absolutely refused to watch it when it first came on. Then what happened was, my best friend who had seen it told me about it and told me some of the twists and some of the turns and some of the different directions they were taking. And so when they decided to make the series, they re-aired the miniseries before they started the series. Because an interesting thing about the miniseries is, it actually was a real pilot. In other words, Ron D. Moore did not have the series sold yet. Basically, what Syfy Channel wanted to do was see if this was going to work or not. So they aired the miniseries in the hopes that an audience would be there, you know, so that they could actually do the series. So it was like a true pilot. That miniseries was like a true pilot, and it has a beginning, a beginning and an end. Obviously, it's open-ended, but it has a beginning, middle, and end. And that's one of the things I actually like about that miniseries, is that it's a complete story. And if they hadn't done anything else, you would still have a nice complete story to add to your Battlestar Galactica fandom, you know. So they ended up doing that, and I went and watched it, you know, basically because of my best friend telling me that he enjoyed it. I ended up watching it before the series was actually, you know, went forward, when they re-aired it. And that was the way I finally saw it. And I finally saw the miniseries because they were re-airing it now that they were doing the series. One other funny thing. I don't remember if it was the year or a couple months before the miniseries came out. Ronald D. Moore was at San Diego Comic-Con with the actress that plays the remake Starbuck, and also the one that plays the blonde Cylon. Okay, those two actresses were with him. They were complete unknowns at the time. And I didn't really know Ron D. Moore by sight, because I just, you know, knew the name as a writer, but he's very distinctive. You know, he has long hair and stuff like that. And I kind of knew who he was, but I didn't really. Now at San Diego Comic-Con, if you are a creator, if you have a creator pass, you can hang out in the pro lounge, you know? And I was hanging out in the pro lounge one day, and I had no idea, but Ron Moore and those two actresses walked in because they were going to do a little interview on the side. And of course, that way they weren't in the hallway and all that kind of stuff. So they did one in the pro lounge. And I had no idea who they were. I mean, I was like right there, right next to them. Hardly anybody was talking to them other than whoever the interviewer was. Nobody really cared. And within like a year, they were huge. You know what I mean? All three of them were huge because both of those actresses, their careers skyrocketed. So I could have known them before they were famous, but didn't happen. So
right. Well,
but yeah, so I didn't see it until my friend recommended it, and then I finally watched it.
So my path to the remake, the Battlestar Galactica miniseries, is in some ways similar yet also different. I've mentioned before.
By the way, Bobby does say, says that trailer was better than the whole season of Picard.
It is.
And Bobby,
it
yeah,
is
you're
better.
right, because they did it right. They did it right.
So I've talked about it before. One of the most surreal moments I've ever had in my life was I had heard that Richard Hatch was working on a revival of Battlestar Galactica, a production that he was involved with. He at the time was active on a lot of different Battlestar Galactica, websites and fan groups and such. And I remembered on one of those, it was either like, I don't remember if it was like a fan page somewhere or if it was a Battlestar Galactica fan website itself, but I had seen some chat and some posts about that he was going to be involved with one of these productions, and they were looking for people who had any kind of CGI animation type experience, or if they'd done any high-end CGI work. At the time, Star Gods had just folded, and for those people who might remember Star Gods, it was a creator-owned comic series I was heavily involved with. And we actually did a lot of groundbreaking CGI work actually in comics. We actually broke some new ground with some of the stuff that we were doing on Star Gods back in the 90s. I had a lot of pieces I had worked on. I was looking for work. And so and at the same time, I was actually doing a tryout for actually Realm Press at that time. It was a small independent publisher. They actually had the rights to publish Battlestar Galactica comic books. So I was in the process of doing a tryout piece actually for Realm Press. I was at one point going to fill in on an issue after Greg LaRoche finished a series of issues. I was going to come in and fill in on one issue, and he was going to come back on and be this series regular again. Realm Press folded before I got the opportunity to do that, or I could say that I actually worked on Battlestar Galactica comic books, but I did not get to. However, that still leads into this next story. So I was amidst doing a tryout for Realm Press. So I had some Battlestar Galactica themed art. I had a bunch of Star Gods CGI stuff. I wanted to continue to do stuff in CGI. So I put together some pieces, and then I sent them in an email to, I thought it was Shushan, might have been Sushan Productions. I just sent it in, if you guys could use me, this sounds interesting. Didn't expect to actually hear from anybody. Okay. Didn't expect anything to come of it at all. Okay. So I just sent it in, was waiting to hear. And then my wife and I, we went out, saw a movie or something in Sedona. We came back, and I had a message on my answering machine. And so we played it back, and it was just a phone number. Someone wanted me to call them back. I kind of ignored it, and then the phone rang, and then I picked it up. And I was shocked to learn because I didn't think I heard what I heard correctly. And the gentleman on the phone identified himself as Richard Hatch. And it turned out it was the Richard Hatch. He had seen the materials that I had turned in. He was very interested in having me come on.
Dave, wait, you mean it was that guy from Survivor?
No.
That's a joke that Richard Hatch used to make, actually. Do you remember that?
I know.
He used to actually make that joke himself.
Yeah, I've heard it before. But no, he said no, he liked what he'd seen, and he wanted me to actually come on board and actually help with Battlestar Galactica: The Second Coming, because at that point they had actually finished obviously this initial pre-production for the one that we had just seen, but they were still at that time still planning to move forward. Richard Hatch had actually done a lot of the world building for this series. They actually did a series of Battlestar Galactica novels I can highly recommend. Warhawk, Rebellion, they're all really good. Especially if you're a classic Battlestar Galactica fan, I would highly recommend track down all of Richard Hatch's novelizations he did for Battlestar Galactica. If you're curious what he was going to do story-wise with The Second Coming, they're all in those novels. So just track them down and read them and enjoy them. I think that's going to be, for those of classic Battlestar Galactica, I think that's kind of going to be the apex for a lot of us. But long story short, he wanted me to do some previs and help them figure out what to do with the new bridge for the Battlestar Galactica. A lot of the stuff I've been doing on Star Gods had Egyptian influence to it, and he wanted the new bridge to have, because a lot of the Galactica stuff had Egyptian touches and influences anyway. When you talk about the episode where they go to Kobol and such on and so forth, so he wanted more of that omnipresent in the bridge, and wanted me to work on previs. And then I worked on that, and then eventually I did work on actually his other follow-up project, The War of Magellan. But the aside to this was, when all this stuff happened with the Bryan Singer production and eventually the Ron Moore production, I signed the petition. There was a petition. There's a petition that came out on the internet, and it was for those of us who wanted to see Richard Hatch's production move forward, and we didn't want to see these others happen, and they were hoping that the executives at Universal would pay attention to what the fans wanted, and maybe Richard Hatch's production might get the opportunity to move forward. I did actually sign the petition. Obviously, the petition didn't do any good, and Ron Moore's production, went forward, and then Richard Hatch's production ended up unfortunately being shelved, and he tried to sideline into Great War of Magellan. But at that time, I had decided I wasn't going to watch it. It's pretty much in the same camp that Eric was in. I was not going to watch it, just on general principle.
PSG loyalist, classic PSG loyalist.
And then what ended up happening is it was coming on. I had some friends who were excited about it, and they were like, "Are you going to watch it?" "No, I'm not going to watch it." "Why not?" I told the whole long torture story I just told everyone here live on the internet. And then I just broke down and I watched it. And I, for the most part, liked it. There was some things I didn't like about it, but overall, there was a lot of stuff I really, really enjoyed about it. And then I thought, well, if they move forward with this seems interesting. Maybe it might make it for an interesting show. And then eventually I ended up becoming a huge fan of this version of Battlestar Galactica. The classic for me is still the Battlestar Galactica. But as I always say, sometimes with these things, it's better to view them as an Elseworlds take. So as an Elseworlds interpretation of Battlestar Galactica, this is interesting and has merit. And there's some really good episodes. And I found myself quite enjoying this version of Battlestar Galactica. I own a pair of the flight wings, the Viper flight wings, and such on and so forth. And I do enjoy this version quite a bit. But at the time, I thought I was going to hate it, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And the miniseries kind of won me over a little bit. And then the actual show itself over time won me over. There were several episodes where I really, really got sucked in, and I quite enjoyed it. So that was how I first heard about it, is, while working on Second Coming, and then hearing about this competing production, and those of us rooting it, for it to not be made because we would prefer the other. So, yeah. And then my mom says, I think a lot of us felt that way. It seems like a lot of us are telling the same kind of story. So that was how I first heard about it. I was working on Second Coming, didn't want this to move forward. But I also, too, just like Eric said, I actually heard about the Bryan Singer production first. And that was actually moved further along than I think a lot of people realized. They'd done a lot of previs, there'd been a script, actually a couple passes on that script before it eventually was essentially shelved. And then Glenn Larson had a competing production at one time, too. There was a lot of movement.
Glenn Larson had the film rights, and he was going to do a Pegasus. He was going to revisit the Pegasus, but only as a feature film, and it would have maintained the continuity of even Battlestar Galactica 1980, theoretically, because it would have just been the Pegasus all by itself. So I also thought was an interesting idea. Also, it's interesting to point out because of the rights issue, because obviously Glenn Larson, he's credited, I think, as like an executive consultant on this version of Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
But I think he didn't really do anything. I think Ron Moore's even said some kind of mean things about him, but he had the rights to the film version. You know what I mean? And that's something that's been discussed even fairly recently about doing a new Battlestar Galactica film. But of course, now it looks like they're going to be doing another one on Peacock. That's the current path, the trajectory. So, and funny enough, all you new Battlestar Galactica fans are just as pissed off as us classic BSG fans and saying, Ron Moore's vision is perfect. How dare you? I hear that all over the place right now.
Yeah.
And I that buzz doesn't mean anything to me because my emotion is invested in the classic BSG. So,
well, for me, like I said, classic will always be my home. You know, that's that. I mean, it's still one of my favorite science fiction television series of all time. But I quite enjoyed a lot about this remake of Battlestar Galactica as well. The pilot, the miniseries less so than a lot of the actual episodes. Once you get in the actual episodes, it really kind of found a pace and started clicking, and they started really they started expanding upon some of the nuanced things kind of here and there, and exploring some interesting ideas that are unique to their version. You know what I mean, of Battlestar Galactica, and those were the things I really liked. It's interesting because their eventual take on Apollo is so completely different from obviously Richard Hatch's Apollo in the classic. But there's some things about his character arc that I really enjoyed watching.
Well, the funny thing is Richard Hatch, because Richard Hatch eventually joined the cast of this Battlestar Galactica. Well, not the cast. He was a reoccurring character.
Yeah.
He continued to do a Battlestar Galactica panel every year at San Diego Comic-Con, and he would get the person who made the score for this version, the science consultant, and I think one other person that was involved with this version of Battlestar Galactica when it became a series. Not the mini-series we're talking about, but when it became a series. And so every year he would do a BSG panel, and of course it was very well attended because he was on the current show. One of the first stories he talked about was that actor who plays the new Apollo, who's actually Lee Adama. Apollo is just his call sign. That's one of the ways that Ron Moore changed things. And he said when the actor met him, the first thing he said when Richard Hatch came on set was like, hey, just so you know, you're Apollo. I'm Lee Adama. You're the only Apollo. He would tell that story all the time. But I thought it was cool that the actor did that because I honestly felt like in a lot of ways, Richard Hatch's character on the series was art imitating life because Richard Hatch's character on the series, Tom Zarek, I believe is the name, he's an outsider and he has his own agenda.
Yep.
And I always thought Ron Moore did that on purpose. I would love to interview him someday about that because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that. But I feel like he cast Richard Hatch, he cast him as a criminal. You know what I mean? He was a criminal, and he cast him as someone who had a completely different agenda and a totally different plan than what, the president and Adama had. And I always felt that was art because he had his own vision for Battlestar Galactica, and he always seemed like the outsider. He was always being treated like kind of like crap, all the way to the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in fact, it's funny that what you say because I do appreciate the miniseries because, like I said, it really is kind of a complete story. It does give us an open-ended ending where we know we can have more happen. But in a lot of ways, it's a complete story.
Yeah.
You could have just left it like that. So I actually appreciate the miniseries more than I appreciate the series, quite honestly, because the series to me was very uneven. And I had moments during the series where I just dropped out completely. And I was like, I don't believe any of this. I was like, this is crap. This is too much, So I actually enjoyed the miniseries for what it was, simply because it was a complete story, even though I have problems with a lot of it. I enjoyed the miniseries and watched it and was like, hey, that was pretty cool. But when I started watching the series, in fact, I remember in the first season, I got like a few, I don't think I even got through the first 2 episodes before I was like, I'm not liking this. And then I would come back. Like I would watch like the first 5 or 10 minutes of an episode and be like, oh, well, this is cool. Okay, I'll keep watching. Or I'd be like, you know what? Let's flip. Because I had cable back then. Flip. Nope. No, I don't like this. This is too dark and depressing for me. I'm changing the channel,
Well, I for me, as the show went on, I just got more sucked in because I got really invested in characters and what they were doing with them. And there was some kind of stuff there towards the end where they kind of, they didn't lose me, but I was just kind of like, okay, all right, I guess that's what you were doing there. But overall, like I said, I do enjoy this version quite a bit. And there's a lot of stuff I think that's really, really great about this. And one of my favorite things, like I said, is actually the arc for Leodama. The changes and everything that he goes through. It's really interesting to kind of watch his.
Well, let's talk about Leodama in this. Let's talk about
right.
Leodama in this, because we're reviewing the miniseries. So,
right,
if you're going to talk about Leodama, how did you feel, for instance, about him being so estranged from his father? Was that something that you were all into, considering the relationship between, the Richard Hatch version and the Lauren Green version, which was so close and so honestly beautiful as far as a father-son relationship? They were so loyal to each other and dependent on each other. And, it's kind of funny. Like, I feel like this show really did set the trend where, like, every father sucks. They're always estranged. Where have you seen that now? That's everywhere. There's no doubt that this miniseries was a trendsetter, and that playbook has been followed like ever since. So what did you think about that initially? You know what I mean? As far as Leodama and, Commander Adama being at odds with each other.
Well, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Over time, when they kind of patched things up and they kind of came back together as the series moved on, I enjoyed seeing them put their kind of father-son relationship back together and then get to the point where they were tight, again. Like,
that's in the series, though. Let's concentrate on the miniseries.
You have to, without setting it up, you don't get to explore that idea, right? But initially watching the miniseries, there were a couple things I didn't really enjoy. I didn't care for that, to be honest. I didn't care for that. I did not care for, and it's interesting because I eventually came to like these ideas, but I didn't care for the weird tension between Kara Thrace, which of course is the female Starbuck, and and you've got Leodama, which is supposed to be Apollo. They kind of intentionally messed. They kind of intentionally messed with all of kind of like the pillars of the original Battlestar Galactica, I think, on purpose. Colonel Ty, for example, Colonel Ty in the original, like, he's the stalwart. He's one of those guys you can count on. Like, he's got Adama's back. You can count on him in any situation. He's right there. He's got it under control. Even if he doesn't maybe have always the right solution, he's always got a plan. Like, he's that he can count on him. And this one, Ty's a drunk, especially in the miniseries. He's a mess. He does, at one point, it seems like he doesn't even want to be in command anymore. And Adama has to straight up ask him, is like, you're either the XO or you're not, So they do take a lot of the pillars of the original show and intentionally kind of mess with them. And then as the series goes on, they put them back together. And I didn't like what they did with kind of rearranging the deck chairs with the pillars of the show, as I understood it, right? But here's the things I did really like about it. I remembered I really liked the guy that ran the flight deck, the chief. He really kind of clicked with me. I found myself,
which he's an actual new character.
Yeah.
New character as well, where they didn't try to base him on a previous character or use the name of a previous character. I personally tended to like the new characters and give them a lot more latitude than the ones that were based on the previous characters, where they reassigned genders. They reassigned races, by the way. It's interesting to think in today's world, one thing, because of course, reassigning races and gender is very popular now. But with Colonel Ty, which you were talking about earlier, Colonel Ty originally was a black man, and they made in this version he's a white man. And I think if that happened today, there might be an outcry. Yeah. And of course, there would be an outcry, from certain segments about the way they did it. Right. Either way, there would be an outcry, right, for the race swapping. But they did a lot of the gender swapping and a lot of the race swapping and stuff like that before, I guess, it was really big. And I'm not a big fan of that. I was like, I was on Kirk Benedict's side when he got really angry and he wrote this big article about they basically emaciating Starbuck, that kind of character was no longer allowed like on network television. He did this big article about it.
Yeah, I remember reading it.
And so I kind of felt the same way. You know what I mean? And I never bought, and this is why I said this is going to be controversial. I'm going to put controversial views. I know people love Katie Sackhoff's. And by the way, James, thank you for giving me the names again, because I'm terrible with names. You know, Katie Sackhoff and Trisha Helfer. Trisha Helfer was the Cylon, the beautiful blonde Cylon. A lot of people love that version of Starbuck, and they love Katie. I thought the entire series, I thought she just comes off as a crazed mess. That's not convincing to me at all as an actual real pilot. I mean, I never liked that character the way they did it. And I know that's like a bombshell for a lot of people that are into this version of Battlestar Galactica, because she's one of the most popular characters. But again, classic BSG, and I sided with Dirk Benedict in that argument that, you know, they kind of ruined his character. You know what I mean? Like all the joy of Starbuck kind of went away. She punches Ty, you know what I mean, in like one of the first scenes in this show, and then Ty tries to make up with her, and she's still a big B to him, you know, and she's still a total bitch. And I'm like, I don't see anything redeeming in that. I don't see anything hopeful in that. I don't like that. I don't see why. I don't get the point. It's like they made her, and then she's smoking the cigar and all that kind of stuff. It's like they made her so masculine and so non-feminine. It's like, why did you make it a girl then? If she's not going to be anything like a girl, because I've met girls in the military. I've served with girls in the military. I've served with girls in public safety. They're still girls for the most part. They don't act like her. You know what I mean? It's like she acted like a guy. You know
right?
What I mean? It's like she's very masculine. Why make her a female if you're going to make her act like a man? I never understood that. To me, she's psychotic, and she has crazy eyes. I mean, watching this, it's like watching it again, and recently, it's like she's got crazy eyes the entire miniseries.
Well, here's the thing, because I was talking about is the characters that I clicked with, that I found as an in. So for me, the characters that I liked that clicked with me, that I wanted to learn more about, you know, was, you know, like Terrell, the crew chief. You know, it was characters like I really liked Gata. You know, I think he was just some kind of specialist. I forget what
the new characters. Again, that's what I was trying to say. Is I like the chief. The chief. Yeah. We never saw like the deck crew chief in the original Battlestar Galactica. We never really saw like enlisted men. You know what I mean? So I love that. I was enlisted in the Navy. You know what I mean? They even have a master at arms in one of the later episodes, and I was a master at arms. Okay, that's what I did. So I mean, I love a lot of that kind of stuff, and a lot of the one you like you said, it almost sounds like Data, right? Like he's kind of like the operations guy.
Yeah, Lieutenant.
And his name.
Yeah,
he has a very interesting story arc, and he's a very cool character in the miniseries because he's very dependable. He's the one who plots the jumps and things like that. So you immediately realize, hey, this he's important. You know what I mean? He doesn't even have a lot of dialogue or anything, but you know he's important. He helps make that bridge run, that command center run. So again, I loved a lot of the new characters. You know what I mean? Like the chief, I think was great. I love seeing that part of the Galactica and making the deck crew like real. You know what I mean? Because we didn't see that in the original Battlestar Galactica. The guy that you were just talking about, the operations, the Cylon, Trisha Helfer, gorgeous, seductive, evil. You know what I mean? Like she passes through so many different colors, and then she's like a religious fanatic on top of everything, but she's a Cylon and all sorts of layers. So I love a lot of the original characters. I just don't like what they did with a lot of the remakes of the original characters. That's
Right.
what I
And
really
see,
didn't like.
and see the one character that they changed a good bit that still clicked with me was Edward James Olmos as Adama.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There's just something about his
No, I
presence.
agree with that. Yeah.
It's so different from
No,
Lauren Green, but it still works.
No, but
So-
but not really. I mean, there's so much of there's so much of Lauren Green's Adama in the Adama in this episode. He's more flawed. He's
Yeah.
more flawed for sure. But let's not forget that Lauren Green's Adama was flawed too. Like for instance, they did the one thing that I picked up on is, if I recall right, Commander Adama and his wife are like divorced, right? In this version.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that Lee hates him. Of course, the big reason he hates him is because he blames him for the death of Dak, of his brother, which was different circumstances than in the original, right? So he blames his father for Dak's death. But the thing is, if you remember, we talked about this in our review of the original. There's that scene where Adama finds his house that's been destroyed in the attack in the classic series, and he has a picture of his wife, who he knows died alone in the house because the boys were with him. And of course, one of his sons died as well in the first attack. And, he realizes that his wife died in that. And he looks at the photo and he says, "I was never there for you." I remember that line. "I was never there for you. When you needed me most, I was not there." And that's kind of the same sentiment that you get from the remake. Is that obviously this Adama was never there from his wife, so his wife left him, as opposed to Lauren Green's version, where yes, he was not there for his wife, and there was some problems, but she stayed with them for whatever reason. We don't know. They don't get into that, but it's the same sentiment. The same sentiment that both of them were so invested in their career and so invested in their position that they neglected their family, right, to some extent.
Right.
So there's a lot of key elements that overlap. And as far as the leadership of Adama, I mean, both Adamas, I think, are like great leaders in their own ways. But there's also, I think, a lot of commonality between the two. I would say, like Lauren Green's Adama is like maybe a little bit more honest. Like he's not as deceptive as Edward James Olmos is Adama, but there's still a great deal of gravitas to both of them. Man of Sand had an insight. He said BSG reboot was much more hard sci-fi compared to original BSG. All the technical details and stylization seem similar to real life naval carrier operations. And Man of Sam, I would agree with you about that, as we were talking about actually showing the importance of the deck crew and the fact that they actually showed these characters and that they have a lot of depth. Obviously, the chief becomes he's a major character in this version. In the main series, he's a major character. And again, a new character. And that's what I tended to like was the new characters. And I would also, with the technical stuff, I remember Richard Hatch, when he did his panels at San Diego Comic-Con, that's one of the people he had on the panel was the science advisor for this version of Battlestar Galactica. So I think that's true. Like there are some much better science elements in this version of Battlestar Galactica than the classic version. They play around with them things like, having like sort of rail guns and things like that. And it's much more grounded in what you could kind of think of like a real Battlestar would be like, in terms of it's very much like an aircraft carrier and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do agree with that a lot of the technical elements in this version are superior to the classic version.
Right. Yeah. And another character that clicked with me really well too, that I was kind of, that I really enjoyed their journey too, that is a character that doesn't really have a presence at all. It's another new character, was the Secretary of Education, who eventually becomes the president. Like that whole thing was interesting too, because you see the devastation of, the colonial citizens or whatever. Like you get a different perspective when you see her having to step up into that role. You know what I mean? And suddenly she has to become the leader. It's interesting because it's something that we deal with in the original Battlestar Galactica, but I don't think we deal with it in quite that way.
Well,
You know,
in the original Battlestar Galactica, they're not sympathetic towards the civilian government.
right.
In the original Battlestar Galactica, the civilian government are a bunch of idiots because they're supposed to represent politicians, right? Which we can relate to that much more now than we can relate to the Laura Roslin version of politicians, I think, right now, because our politicians have failed us in a lot of ways. And that was the message of the classic BSG, was that these politicians are idiots and going to get us all killed. And he was actually much more pro-military, obviously. And basically, it's also interesting to note that Lauren Green's version of Adama was also part of the Council of the 12. So he was both. He was both a commander of a Battlestar, but he was also part of the original civilian government. Whereas in this version, Adama is a senior, actually probably the most senior commander in the fleet, but he's not a member of the civilian government. So they were able to show that conflict, it was amplified in this version, but it was there in the original version. I make no question. I mean, there's not a whole lot of new ideas. You know what I mean? As far as Ron Moore took a lot from the original Battlestar Galactica that other people give him credit for that weren't into the classic series. It's like, nope, he took that. We even discussed how the idea of human Cylons was introduced in Galactica 1980. We talked about that off the air. I think like months ago, we were talking about that in a casual conversation. The idea of human Cylons was in Galactica 1980, which is like universally panned. That wasn't Ron Moore's idea either, So it's interesting because she's more sympathetic. She's dying of cancer. Being a female, I think, makes her more sympathetic in some ways. But in the original, the conflict was there. There was always a conflict between the military and the civilian government in the original Battlestar Galactica from the beginning.
Yeah.
And if you recall, that was the rich guy who was on the council. He was going to get them all killed.
Yeah, Cyrus.
He was going to get them all killed because he wanted to go to that planet with the insectoid-like race and just stay there. And he wanted to disarm. Remember, he wanted to destroy all their weapons and all that kind of stuff. So the conflict was always there in original Battlestar Galactica with the military versus the civilian government. In fact, one thing they never really did in this version, even in the series, was they even had like police. They had their own security forces in the original Battlestar Galactica that would be at odds with the colonial warriors. They would actually get into like Mexican standoffs and things like that.
Yeah, the black shirts.
Yeah,
they call them the black shirts.
And they never really went there with this version. They never really established like a police force like Rosalind's. I think she has bodyguards later, but she never really has like a police force.
Yeah,
they never went there.
Well, that's like in addition to never went there, they introduce a new version of Boxy, but they never do anything with it, luckily.
That was kind of interesting.
I had forgotten how much they kind of fit Boxy into the miniseries, but then he doesn't even come into play at all. Even though he's sitting with the Viper pilots there at the end, and you're going, oh, we're going to do that again.
Well, you think like Boomer's going to be kind of like his surrogate mother.
Yeah, that's what you think.
The same way that Apollo became his father. And that actually, I think, kind of would have been interesting. But obviously, they jettisoned that because they just I guess they just decided they wanted Boomer to go in a different direction. So they didn't explore that. I think that actually could have been interesting if she actually had like this adopted son. It could have added a lot to her character, especially since, spoiler alert, she's a Cylon. So you know what I mean? That would have been an interesting storyline, in my opinion. I mean, I can think of story possibilities in my head right now if that had been the case, but they never did that with her character. They decided to just jettison poor Boxy into space, so to speak. So
yeah. And then Man of Sand has a comment here. He says Lauren Green's Adama was more like the fatherly Pa Kare from Bonanza. And yes, I'd have to agree with that. I'm a big fan of Bonanza. I still enjoy watching reruns of Bonanza. I've got a whole bunch of them on various DVDs I picked up over the years. And and I think he was cast in that role of Adama because of his role as Pa Ken in Bonanza. It's that I think it's very much intentional, what they were doing with his character. But no, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like I was surprised because they do make some changes with Adama, and I was surprised that I still click with him really well. Where some of
I
the
think
other
that's Edward James
characters,
Olmos. Let's just be honest here.
Yeah.
Edward James Olmos is one of the best actors I think of all time. He has an incredible presence to him. You know what I mean? So it's all him. It's all the actor. I mean, I think he blows everybody else out of the water. Personally, I mean, his acting is just superb. And so he fits that role really, really well. A lot of these other actors on this show were complete unknowns and very inexperienced. So he stands out. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. He stands out.
Yeah. And then James has another comment too. I don't quite understand. It says she needed a little something. I don't know if he's talking about.
I think he's talking about Boomer.
President Boomer.
I think he's talking about Boomer.
Yeah. Well, Boomer has an interesting arc, but it's definitely not one of my favorites.
It's not mine either.
Yeah,
I think my idea is better, because if she was caring for this child, and they had this surrogate, think about the possibilities of that, of this human child who comes to view this Cylon as his mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that could have had some interesting possibilities, but again, like you said, they decided that they didn't want to pursue Boxy in the series. So
yeah.
But he is fairly prominent in this version, and he even looks a lot like the original Boxy. He even looks like the actor. Yeah. But there was no Muffet, which is very disappointing. That alone, I have to give this show a big low mark. Is there's no Muffet.
Well, I personally, I think Muffet needed to stay in the original one, to be honest. Well, so here's the thing. So in order to give it a proper retrospective, one of the things we want to talk about is if we feel like it still holds up, and how do we feel about the film today. We talked a little bit about what we thought when we originally watched it, how we learned about it, and then we want to talk, contextually about how we feel about the film today. So tell me, Eric, how do you feel about Battlestar Galactica, the miniseries from 2004 today?
Well, like I said, I think it's very obvious that this is what set the trend for current sci-fi, and for better or worse, and in a lot of ways I say worse, I think like Star Trek Picard, Discovery, I think even some, in a lot of ways, I think the Disney Wars films for Star Wars, if you really like all that stuff, you have this show and this miniseries to thank for it. I myself don't like a lot of that stuff. And so I think the seeds were planted in this show. So it's absolutely a trailblazing show. I don't dispute that. But I think it created some disturbing precedents. I mean, when it comes to all these remakes and reboots, in fact, the first time I heard the phrase, I think reboot, I think was in regards to this show. I think this one show kind of defined reboot. Now I want to explain something that's kind of interesting. So the one new BSG, Battlestar Galactica remake, as I call it, a thing that I have is this. This is the PlayStation 2 Battlestar Galactica video game. Okay. Now, as you can see, it's got sort of a classic looking Viper, but as you can clearly see, this is the new logo. You can see what looks like a classic base star. There's some other art on the back there for you. And you can see that this is not based on the original series. This is based on the new series, the one that we're talking about. But when this was made, they still hadn't made the series. And I'm not sure when this was actually produced, how far they had gotten into even making the miniseries. So what this game is about is it's about the previous Cylon War. And so in the previous, they allude to that in the miniseries. They talk about the previous Cylon War that was like 40 years ago, where the The Cylons were not the product of some other alien species and revolted against them. They revolted against the humans. That was one of the twists that Ron Moore decided to do, that it was the humans that created them, and then they revolted. Well, in that game version that I showed you is supposed to be about the previous Cylon War when Adama was a pilot. And it's kind of funny because there's so many weird things in that video game that didn't carry on to the series because they didn't really know what the show was yet. And you can see that when they show the scene of when they're in the hangar and they're showing the museum. And obviously you have the classic Vipers that look almost exactly like the Vipers from the original show. And they show a Cylon that is a Cylon from the original show. And they show the base star, and it is the base star from the original show. That's in the museum because the Galactica is going to be turned into a museum. So it really confused people. I remember it really, really confused people. And so the thing for me is I would have much rather have had some sort of a continuation, and it could have had an emphasis on new characters. In fact, like I said, I prefer in general, with Adama being probably the big exception, I prefer the new characters to the remade characters, the remake characters. And that's kind of how I feel about it today. Like, there's no doubt that it set trends and it was a huge trendsetter and it kind of redefined sci-fi as we know it. I just don't know if I think that that was a good thing or not. In fact, I guess I would say I don't think it's a good thing. Now, this show is very watchable. I would say that. It's very watchable. And again, what I like about it is that it's a complete story. If they didn't make any of the series, it would still be a satisfying story. And the other thing I really like about it, I will say this, the other thing I really like about it, to be real on a positive note, thing I really like about it was I always thought the attack on the colonies was treated too lightly, that it just went by too fast. And the rest of the story of the original Battlestar Galactica, the movie, the first pilot, if you will, it kind of got sidetracked and got a little weird to me with the insectoids and all that kind of stuff. I really like that this movie or this miniseries is just about the attack. I really like. I really like that. That was a good move in my mind that they expanded the attack, because I always thought the attack, being such a pivotal moment for the 12 colonies and for humanity, should have been treated with more, we should have seen it more. We should have seen the other well, we don't see it in this one. We don't get to see like the other battle stars be destroyed or anything like that. We just see like them already destroyed. But the story is really about the attack. That's what this whole story is. And that I do like, because I think the original BSG could have done that and probably should have done that, but they didn't. They didn't focus on the attack. Man of Stan had a couple comments. He said, I recall their new Caprica arc with its role reversal of colonials becoming a rebel resistance against Cylon captors, causing a fan revolt, which tanked the ratings. Moore and company had to scramble to undo it. And I don't recall the fan backlash. I actually thought that story arc was fairly well received. That's interesting. It's interesting how people perceive things differently as they happen. But that, of course, is from the series, not from the miniseries. And then also Manisan said, the classic Viper Mark II always looked great. And the newer Viper Mark III in the reboot had a nicer, more modern look. The Viper Mark I was passed over in the original and was used in the Buck Rogers TV show. That's interesting. So I will say that I actually like the classic Viper look, like this look, the classic Viper look. I prefer it over the new version. In fact, I think the new version looks kind of weird. But I've always liked the classic Viper, and I like the classic Vipers in this one. And I'm glad they brought them back. And I thought that was cool, and that's something that I did like. So that's pretty much my take on it for today, Dave. What about you?
Well, I would say that I'm still processing your comments about how it may have set the trend and led us to where we are today. I'm still kind of processing those comments. But beyond that, let me just say that I quite enjoyed the miniseries. I still enjoy the miniseries. I agree with you; it's very rewatchable. The thing I really like about it, like I said, are the characters I was surprised to like as much as I did, and they're kind of the more supporting characters. They're the newer characters. It's Gata, it's Chief Terrell. It's even characters like Callie, and it's all those supporting characters. And again, Edward James Olmos, those are the ones. Him as Adama, like those are the ones that really click, and those are the ones that I enjoy following throughout the miniseries. And then as the show went on, eventually I found myself very intrigued with, Lee Adama and his story and all the things that he goes through, because he has a very interesting arc over the course of the series. But in the miniseries, initially, I found his relationship with his dad to be a bit abrasive, and I didn't really care for it. But I will say that I think it's very rewatchable. I think it holds up really well. There's some of the action sequences that I really enjoy too. And kind of how, like you said, kind of how they handle the level of devastation and the calamity of the chaos and the sheer volume of the loss of life. You feel much more, those moments. They feel much more visceral, and they feel much more relatable than I think than the original. Even though you feel you go through a similar thing in the original, I think it is a little bit more intensified because they do drag it out a little bit more, and you do get a sense for just how much they've really lost. And that adds a lot to the drama. So, at the end of the day, I would say that the miniseries still holds up. I think it's worth a rewatch. If you're quarantined as a part of our quarantine stream special, if you're looking for something that's interesting to watch, like I said, it's streaming on Comet, but then also number 2, like I said, Syfy's announced they're getting ready to do a marathon. I think with actually Trisha Helfer actually hosting or somehow being involved. So I think this is an interesting thing that's fun to revisit. Just because while it does have kind of some downer moments, it is still very rewatchable and has some really fun sequences. Like I like the scene where the Cylons launch the nukes at the president's ship. It's just like a transport ship, and they can't find their escort because Lee Adama is supposed to be escorting them, and then he comes in his Viper, and he actually uses his, the exhaust of his, space plane or whatever to kind of, pull the rocket off and have it come after him. And just everything about that sequence is fun from when you think it's like, where did he go? And then the music, and it all works really well. And it's very exciting and fun and thrilling. And I still really enjoy that sequence, actually. So for me, I'd say it definitely holds up. It's definitely worth rewatching. But I'm going to have to ruminate on your comments, Eric, that maybe this set a trend that we're still dealing with the ramifications of today. Because I will tell you this is much more solid, better storytelling than what we got in these episodes of Picard, for example. But I can see sort of the downbeat tone and kind of those similar, kind of ideas kind of percolating, so it's just curious, especially when you consider I had been listening to an audiobooks. They talk about the 50-year journey, and it's all about, it's like a complete unauthorized history of Star Trek. And there's a lot of conversations about how Ron Moore was constantly pitching these ideas, like in the writer's room for Deep Space Nine and stuff and whatever. And a lot of,
I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to come back to that. And the thing is, for people don't know, Ron Moore was fired from Voyager because he was basically saying that this storyline doesn't make any sense. One of the big things that he wanted was, he was like, the Voyager's way too pristine. They should be having some damage by now, and that should be part of a problem, and we should be exploiting that. And he also hated the Equinox episode. And his version of the encounter with the Pegasus is his answer to the Equinox story arc in Voyager. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is, when I get into arguments with Enterprise fans about continuity problems and things like that with Enterprise, I always throw in BSG. And I always say, this version of BSG, I'm like, why didn't they do the technology in Enterprise like we have the tech in Battlestar Galactica? It would have been a much better bridge from where we are today to what we see in Star Trek. If we had ships that were much more like the ships in this reality, with things like rail guns, and the fact that they don't have actual shields, it's all hull plating. You know what I mean? Instead of this, what was the stupid thing that they did in Enterprise? It was like polarize the hull, which is just like another word for some. It didn't make any sense. You know what I mean? It's like, no, they should just have really thick hulls. You know what I mean? And that's
right.
It was all those little kinds of things. Nukes. That's the big one too, because in the Romulan War they were supposed to have nukes. BSG showed, that would be cool. Yeah, they shoot nukes at each other. You know what I mean? That would have been a good transition point. So I heard that Ron Moore had some of that in there as well. It's like that was kind of him answering back at like Enterprise and Voyager and saying, you could have done it better. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. I like the tech and the aesthetics. I like the fact that things are a little more analog. And I like how they explain it too. The fact that they didn't allow network computers on the Galactica. That's one of the reasons they survived the attack. I do like those kinds of things. I think a lot of that was a direct answer to Voyager and Enterprise. And then Man of Sand had another comment where he said the Adama maneuver scene at the end of the new Caprica arc was one of the most spectacular and original space battle scenes I've seen in a long time. Quote, all hands stand by for turbulence. And Man of Sand, I know a story about that. I love that scene too from the new Caprica arc. That was one of the arcs that I found interesting. It's kind of funny because I always thought the new Caprica arc was incredibly unrealistic, but I thought it was also incredibly compelling and interesting. And again, I mentioned that Richard Hatch used to do these panels where he had the science advisor for the Battlestar Galactica series. And he talked about that scene you're talking about. And the science advisor, the question he was answering was somebody was asking, have you ever like kind of stepped in and said, don't do that because that's like too cheesy. That's not science. Well, he talked about this Adama maneuver you're talking about. And he said that was the one time where he's all like, yeah, the physics doesn't make sense there. But he said it was so cool. He basically was like, yeah, just do it. Because even though he knew the physics was totally wrong, because if you think about it, a ship in free fall like that, it would be like tumbling nose over end and things like that. You know what I mean? It wasn't designed to do that. It wouldn't just fall like that, like a rock or whatever. Wouldn't work. It just wouldn't happen. But anyway, he actually did the reverse where he was all like, I knew that was complete bull crap, but it was so cool. And by the way, I do think that's one of the coolest scenes in sci-fi, the Adama maneuver, as you talk about, but it's totally unrealistic. It would not happen that way. It would not work.
And talking about the show, and there's moments in shows like this where you can do something that's really dark and it's terribly compelling. And I'll never forget that moment in this series, not this particular miniseries, but where there's the battle going on with the resurrection ship and Adama's been blown free of his Viper and he realizes he's got that leak in his spacesuit. And at first he's trying to find a way to kind of contain it. And then you see him make that decision and he goes, well, if this is the end, this is the end, And that was incredibly, incredibly dark and depressing. I remember audibly gasping the first time I saw that episode. And then to see him eventually rebound, you know what I mean? And then come back from that. That's what I'm talking about, like in terms of arc. Like I found his character so interesting to follow along because he has all the ups and all the downs. Whether you want to talk about the black market story, like that was a crazy story too. Just all that stuff was really, really interesting.
I hated that story, by the way.
I thought it was interesting.
I hated it. That was one of the ones where I started watching and I was just like, this is stupid. You know what I mean? But that's the thing. I mean, I think if people haven't seen this, I would say go ahead and absolutely watch it. And one of the reasons, obviously, we're doing this is because it is available streaming for free on multiple platforms. So this is something that you can, You don't even necessarily have to binge watch it. Like if you could watch it on Comet, you can just watch it as it airs. You know what I mean? But it's like, for me, there are arcs that work really well and there are arcs that didn't. You know what I mean? Like I said, the new Caprica arc is really interesting to me because I think it's incredibly unrealistic and silly. And it's like, no, there's no way they'd survive that. That's game over. You know what I mean? But the way they did it was just, it was cool. You know what I mean? Like there were so many cool moments in that arc. And then also, no spoilers, but what happens to Tom Zarek, to Richard Hatch's character, that arc of what happens to him, I really like that. I really dug that. You know what I mean? I thought that was compelling drama, So for me, it goes back and forth. And obviously I'm with, one of the reasons we chose this is to say, hey, people, take a look at it. But I do have issues with it. I mean, I have some major issues with it. There's no doubt about it.
But I do think overall, you're kind of at the same court as me. If there's some opportunities to watch this, so it's definitely worth rewatching. And especially if you've never seen it, definitely give it a shot. I think a lot of people would enjoy it. I think this is more that gritty down. Like if you like a gritty downbeat, I think this is still highly more entertaining and fun than Picard.
There's no doubt about that.
Hell of a lot more compelling. So hell of a lot more compelling.
But going back to what I was talking about too before is like sometimes when the original trendsetter of say a bad trend, because that's kind of what I'm arguing. Well, very oftentimes that version's okay. That version's fine. That version's actually good because it was new. Right. They were doing something new. Once you keep using that same formula over and over again, it's kind of like that idea of the clone of a clone of a clone, and it starts to get just more and more degraded and more degraded over time. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the analogy that I would use. It's like, well, this is the original clone, if you will. You know what I mean? So this one's much better than say Picard or Disney Wars, things like that in my book. So
So I think with that, we're pretty good, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So real quick, just a bit of house cleaning here before we go into the outro. We had the 3 different sketch cards here we were putting up for this particular episode. We had the Punisher here, we had the RoboCop, and then we had the Batman animated. And we didn't have anyone else really kind of chime in. So I think we are going to go with the RoboCop as the card from tonight. And I will actually, because we've had a bunch of different people comment. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to go through and we'll find someone and maybe we'll announce it next episode. But we'll pick that person and we'll notify them via chat or whatever, basically sometime later this week. And then once we settle on this one, I'm going to go ahead. I've got a few others I need to get out. I'm going to get a couple of those in the mail. So those remainders that are sitting around here, they'll actually go out in the mail probably towards the end of this week. But yeah, we'll do the RoboCop. So very cool. And I think with that, if we're good, I think we'll go ahead and we will go into the outro, if that sounds good to you, Eric. I think we do have one more comment here. Did we get to this comment?
Let's leave that for the sign off.
All right,
let's leave that for the sign off.
Sounds good. All right. So I thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty. I've been one of your hosts. If you're curious to learn more about me, see some of my artwork, find links to social media, all that kind of stuff, you can do that at my website. That's at davebeatty.com. That's www.davebeaty.com. And hopefully you get a chance to check that out. I want to thank Eric Alexander, my great co-host, for coming on here and bringing his unique perspective and opinions here to the show. Please tell the folks who will be watching or listening at home where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
I am most active on Twitter, and that is BassGod14, BassGod14. I can be reached there. Also, that's what the YouTube is and the Twitch, so you can reach me. My direct messages are always open. I'm always happy to hear from you guys. Would love some ideas for things that you want us to review. And then Man of Sand says, another powerful scene at the end of the new Caprica arc was between Saul and Ellen Tigh. That triggered a huge outpouring of fan sentiment for her character, which convinced more to bring her back. And with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.